Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, January 20th, 2022. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Kyla Schuller, author of The Trouble with White Women, a Counterhistory of Feminism. Meanwhile, Chuck Schumer's stunt has predictably failed. Republicans blocked voting rights legislation for a 5th time, as promised by Manchin and Sinema, Democrats' attempts to change the filibuster rules also failed. Another loss for Biden, who is on the defense 1 year into his presidency today. He spoke to the media yesterday, essentially admitting defeat, and advocated for breaking up Build Back Better into little pieces and trying to pass the parts independently, which the Republicans will just filibuster. So, U.S. jobless claims have risen to a 3-month high, which is especially awful given the fact that the child tax credit expired, as have pandemic extended unemployment and eviction protections. The Supreme Court has ruled against Trump, with only Clarence Thomas dissenting, not descending, especially not in the studio. I would not like that. And has decided that the January 6th committee can have access to Trump's White House documents.
No.
Not good. If even the CIA says Havana Syndrome is BS, it's BS. An internal investigation has found that it is, quote, unlikely that a foreign actor is using a space laser to give intelligence officials headaches. Turns out they're just paranoid and or hungover.
Well, good thing we did all that speculating about it.
Yep. And lastly, in Minneapolis, protesters physically blocked cops from evicting a homeless encampment in the North Loop, and they were successful in stopping them. So, a little bit of good news at the end of headlines here. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. It is the Majority Report. There we go. I was up late a little bit last night. I went to the Ranger game, and it was a historic win where they were down 3-1 after the first period. Then DJ Pauly D of Jersey Shore fame, which is a show that I really did enjoy for quite a while.
He subbed in?
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, he put on pads. He DJ'd for some reason in between the first and second period, which I'm like, when? But there's 2 intermissions, so like, when do you decide? But he did, and then it gave the team some magic, and they won 6-3. So it was a fun time for me last night.
What songs did he play? Anything stick out?
Just like remixes of a Bieber song.
Some LMFAO.
Some LMFAO type stuff. I was just like, and I don't understand DJing, right? You're just, he's moving his fingers around and.
Looks like you understand it pretty well.
Yeah, but like, what are you physically doing? Why not just do that in advance and then press play? And then press stop.
Because in the moment, it's sometimes fun to put your hand on the record to make it slow down or speed up.
Okay, well,
Sounds cool.
Then to me, that sounds like I could do that. It sounds like I could do that. And
well, I don't know. Maybe we should talk to Madison Square Garden staff. We should get you on this,
honestly,
that second period.
I'm offended that they do a celebrity cam. They've never even approached me about this. That's
DJ Emma V.
Oh, Jesus. I hate that whole scene.
DJ Vig.
I feel like there's a lot of like DJ Vig, yeah. There's a lot of rich kids that don't know what to do with their lives that are DJing in this world. Yeah. That's not for me. Anyway, on that note, let's talk about Build Back Better. Biden held a press conference yesterday to talk about his first year in office. I would say he's commemorating it, but I don't think that even he is pleased with the job that he's done, because despite the fact that he is an aggressive centrist and a dinosaur of a Democratic politician who has a lot of old school perspectives, he did want to achieve something in his presidency. He didn't want to be a lame duck after year one, which is how it's kind of starting to appear. Build Back Better appears to be dead, and I think it's dead because of Joe Manchin and because Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer did not fully grasp who they were dealing with and did not do a full court press in an aggressive messaging campaign and pressure campaign in the lead up to these negotiations, even though Schumer behind the scenes understood that Manchin wanted to cut it down significantly. They started at $7 trillion. That was Bernie Sanders' proposal, cut down to 3.5, then cut down to 2.2, then 1.8, which...
And like the last ones were done after while a signed document existed saying actually it's 1.7.
Yes, right, or 1.75 or whatever Manchin actually proposed. So all of these negotiations, at least in public, appeared to be, or they tried to portray them as good faith. But in reality, Schumer and Biden pretty much knew behind the scenes, now this is what Manchin wants to do, which is like, why would you set yourself up in that way? There was hope that they could drag him along and that this number was not going to be the thing that he stuck to. They didn't. He cut it down significantly. And then once his proposal was the one that they were going to adopt without the extension of the child tax credit, Manchin was like, actually, I don't want it anyway.
I think they weren't expecting a massive another bout of COVID. And I think I'm kind of convinced that Biden, like, I agree with you that he would have rather have got it passed now, but I also think that they thought they were going to have a super, super strong economy and be crushing things right now. And people wouldn't be worried about some of that stuff, or it would go down a little bit less bitter than it has now, which is, like you said, like we have rising unemployment. And a couple of weeks ago, only Jen Psaki saying we're not going to pay people to sit on their couch at home, right?
Yeah, sending you tests in the mail, that's ridiculous. Fast forward to the fact that now they have to do it, even though the Omicron wave might be falling off a cliff soon enough, although we are still in the thick of things. But all that said, here is Biden responding to a question from reporters on Build Back Better. And essentially, he has adopted the position that some centrist Democrats in the House who feel that they are vulnerable have taken, that we need to break Build Back Better up just so we look like we're passing something, essentially. Now Biden is on board with that.
Your comment that you made, that you're confident that major chunks of Build Back Better can pass, are you breaking it up? Does that
Well, it's clear to me that that we're going to have to probably break it up. I think that we can get, and I've been talking to a number of my colleagues on the Hill, I think it's clear that we would be able to get support for the $500+ billion for energy and the environmental issues that are there, number one.
Can you pause it for a second?
Number two.
Unless that goes through reconciliation, why do you feel that you can get the votes that you need? Because a reminder that the filibuster still exists, and unless a climate bill goes on its own through reconciliation, they'd have to redo this process all over again. The Republicans are going to filibuster it.
Emma, he's talking to his colleagues about it, okay? I mean, what more do you want him to do?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad that he has assuaged our fears by telling us tales of water cooler chit-chat.
Yeah, the guy who's surprised by the Republicans' obstructionism somehow is going to be leading this. Right?
Somebody who's worked with Republicans his entire career is just shocked that they are who they are. We'll get to that in a bit, but continue.
I know that the two people who've opposed, on the Democratic side at least, support a number of the things that are in there. For example, Joe Manchin strongly supports early education, 3 and 4 years of age, strongly supports that. There is strong support for, I think, a number of the way in which to pay for these, pay for this proposal. So I think there is. I'm not going to negotiate against myself as to what should.
Real quick, those people support minority rule more than they support those other things. They like to say they support the other things because that's, you know, good for campaign literature. But the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah. Continue.
It shouldn't be in it, but I think we can break the package up, get as much as we can now, and come back and fight for the rest later.
You can't do that, though, because I don't know why I'm explaining the rules of reconciliation to the Biden. Well, maybe they know this and they just want to look busy, right? It's the equivalent of you're working on a desk job and your boss walks behind you and you pull up an Excel spreadsheet when you were actually on YouTube. That's what he's doing here. Because unless the only way to get these things through, because you're not going to get 10 Republicans on board, is to go through a reconciliation process. And that means you have to do
senators on board.
And that means you have to do one big bill. One big bill. So that is the only solution here. Breaking it up kills Build Back Better. The only thing that's on life support at this point, the only thing that might resuscitate it, is if there is a public campaign against Manchin and even cinema to this point, where honestly, I would love if universal pre-K passed and we just got a little bit of something, but it is pathetic that we're at this point. And the climate provisions, which are so necessary. So that is the only path forward. And Biden is deluding himself if he thinks that he can now work with Republicans again on smaller provisions to get past a 60 vote threshold. At the same time that he's publicly talking about what are Republicans for? People were giving him a lot of credit. Oh man, Biden's finally taking it to the Republicans. He's not, though, because he's still under the same delusion here if he thinks that he can break up these provisions and pass them independently.
Yeah, and I mean, this sort of veil of not comprehending reality about Republicans, Matt Fuller of Daily Beast tweeted out, "It'd be interesting in my lifetime to see what a Democratic president could do by starting from the assumption that they will get zero help from Republicans to enact their agenda, even the popular elements and needed elements of their agenda." And I mean, I said about that, recognizing reality would compel a confrontation with the moneyed interest in the Democratic Party itself, that everybody who supported Joe Biden over Bernie Sanders. That was the whole point. It was, we don't need to actually confront the party itself. We just need to win and get enough blue bodies in there. And we're seeing the failure of that. And all these people that were getting very solemn about Bernie's theory of change and will it work? Joe Biden's has died right in front of us, and we should take note to recognize that.
We should, but I mean, how many times have we even seen this? We saw it under Obama too. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The substance of what is done takes a backseat to temporary victories and electoral success and career success for those very people. And amazingly, the press buys that too, because they're as protected and inundated in many ways.
And Manchin and Sinema are going to get what they want, because when Biden has to sell these achievements, the bipartisan infrastructure package, that's going to create the sort of voter turnout that Manchin Sinema like the people that, not like these people who are grasping for the extra $2,000 in Georgia. Those people are inconvenient. It's going to be those people who actually are excited about bipartisan infrastructure, which is to say not very many, and they're probably going to get creamed. But where they win, it's going to be, it's cultivating a certain type of moderate turnout, I think.
And I'm always yes-handing you, but that's exactly what the Democratic donor base now consists of. And they have made a conscious effort, and Biden is an example of this as the president. They've made a conscious effort. We are going to pivot to upper middle class suburban voters in certain areas because it helps us financially, and because we don't necessarily need to do a ton. We can... Those kinds of people are very sympathetic to something like let's restrict gun rights. We're not going to do anything about it because that would require some filibuster rule changes, but we're going to fundraise off of it, and then we'll take the emotion of those kinds of people and parlay it into into career success for us, independent of what we're going to deliver for people. And so just to bring it back to Build Back Better here, do not listen to these centrist Democrats, corporate Democrats in these purple-ish districts, because these kinds of people are likely to lose regardless of whether or not Build Back Better is broken up and they can say, look at what I got done. They're going to lose anyway. The best chance to actually get something done for people and deliver a tiny, tiny sliver of what is necessary is to keep it intact to at least some degree and pass it through reconciliation. All right, we have to take a quick break. And I want to tell you, I know, right? I want to tell you about one of our favorite sponsors, Sunset Lake Seder. All Seder tinctures will be 30% off. There's a sale coming up here. The sale starts, or did start, on Tuesday, the 18th, and ends next Tuesday. So you have a few more days to order off this sale. 30% off all the Seder tinctures. I used it last night with melatonin to try to get to bed after I was a little electrified after the game that I went to. It was one of the best games of the season for the Rangers. And it helped. I was able to fall asleep a little later than I wished because I try to get up earlier when I'm hosting the show by myself. But once I did take it, I went to sleep. And I've been using the new Mega Seder tincture also after work sometimes. Orders over $100 will receive a free 750 milligram tincture, a $30 value for free. No promo code needed. Products will automatically be discounted at checkout. So some of these new products here, this 750 milligram, 1500 milligram, 3000 milligram, 6,000 milligram tinctures. They're now available in 2 new flavors, mint and citrus. And there's a 600 milligram full spectrum tincture. Sunset Lake Seder is release those new flavored tinctures, and they're really great. I have the natural flavored one, but Sam says he really likes the mint. I've been munching on the gummies the last couple days, so if you've been liking my vibe lately, it's maybe attributable to that. I've definitely been liking your vibe, and I love those gummies. They're actually they taste so good that I have to stop myself from eating so many more because I'm the kind of person, I love gummy candy. I really do. And that's what it tastes like. So if you do get those gummies, they're really excellent, but just make sure you don't have too much because that's very easy. So again, this sale is happening Tuesday to Tuesday. So next Tuesday it ends, 30% off. Orders over $100 will receive a free 750 milligram tincture, a $30 value for free. Visit sunsetlakeseder.com to try these amazing new products and take advantage of this sale while it lasts. Sale ends January 25th. Let's take a quick break. I gotta get some more water, and then when we come back, we are going to be joined by Kyla Schuller, author of The Trouble with White Women, A Counterhistory of Feminism. We are back, and we are joined by Kyla Schuller, author of The Trouble with White Women, A Counterhistory of Feminism. You are also an assistant professor of women and gender studies at Rutgers University. Kyla, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, I mean, we have talked about the it's the favorite topic of mine, talking about the perils and pitfalls of white feminism and what it represents, and we've talked about it on the show before. But your book described it in such a succinct way, and I loved this definition. White feminism is theft disguised as liberation. Can you explain what you meant by that? And we can start there.
Yeah. I really wanted to understand the details and contours of what white feminism is and does when I wrote this book. And, I think it's so useful the way that people are using this term widely to understand the kind of feminism that is putting gender above all, and then ends up, as a result, actually leaning into other forms of inequality, like structural racism and capitalism and climate change, because of putting...
You just lean in there, right? Did you do that on purpose?
Exactly. And because of putting gender above all. But I found that one of the most common ways that we talk about white feminism doesn't actually fully grasp the full extent of the problem. And that is that one of the most common definitions is white feminism is a kind of feminism that ignores women of color, poor women, and other marginalized folks. And I found that idea that white feminism ignores more marginalized people actually is too benign. It underestimates the threat, the extent of the problem, which is that the trouble with white feminism is not that it is committing a sin of omission. It's actually an act of dispossession. It actually ends up reinforcing other forms of inequality in the struggle to get women to the top. And Sheryl Sandberg being a perfect example of working so hard, as she argues, to get women to be corporate CEOs in contemporary capitalism. The problem is that if the goal is getting women to the top of our current structures, you actually end up reinforcing some of the other inequalities that have created that hierarchy in the first place.
So it kind of creates, it redefines white feminism as an action, as active, as opposed to kind of the more passive exclusion in the way that it had been previously discussed.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way of putting it. And then it also means that the solution to it needs to be more active also, right? The solution to white feminism is not only including people of color, the poor, trans people. It needs to be more active than that. The solution is actually to dismantling the idea that we can't have a feminism that is ever separate from the fights against racism, wealth inequality, and many of the other structural inequities we have today.
So would you say that white feminism has defanged and depoliticized the feminist movement to a degree? I mean, I know that's not a direct process, and often that's, that's just sometimes what happens. Like, I feel like we saw over time, like I feel like we saw an example of that with MLK on Monday, right? I mean, every brand is tweeting out quotes from MLK, and every Republican politician has no problem using his name. And I feel that there's a very similar thing that has happened with feminism that you describe.
I think the problem might be a little worse than that, though, which is that it's less that it has depoliticized a feminism that fights for real equality, and more that there have always been two distinct different kinds of feminism that actually have competing politics. And one of those is white feminism that is quite cozy with, empire, etc. And the other is intersectional feminism, which fights for a broad-based structural equality for all. So, for example, one of the most shocking details I found when I was researching this book was that, according to a recent poll, 42% of women who vote Republican in the most recent elections consider themselves feminists. So it's actually that there is a strong, active, conservative, even sometimes explicit white supremacist feminism alongside this other form of feminism that supports things like Black Lives Matter and police reform or abolition. And recognizing that there is different kinds of feminism, I think actually is one of our central struggles.
So what does white supremacist feminism look like? I mean, often you in your mind, you see tiki torches and men, right? In Charlottesville, if you're thinking of that in like the past 6 years. But that, what you're saying makes total sense. It's not incompatible. It's just maybe that it's not represented in the way that we think about white supremacy in our cultural ether.
Yeah, in a less obvious way, it looks like Ivanka Trump in 2016 on the campaign trail saying, "My dad is a feminist." In a more explicit way, it looks like the work that sociologist Jesse Daniels has found in researching online platforms like Stormfront and other white supremacist sites, that there are actually active groups of women on these feminist subthreads on these sites. People who support pay equality, people who support some kind of gender balance at home in terms of sharing workload, and even people who support abortion in these white supremacist sites, but often with a caveat that they support abortion for people of color because they want to prevent more births by people of color, but they don't support abortion for white women because they want to protect a white majority.
Well, that's interesting because that goes into one of the historical examples that you do cite in your later chapters, Margaret Sanger, I believe, right? And we can get into that for sure. I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the modern examples and then go into that, because you mentioned empire there, and you write about how white feminism works alongside or works with racism, capitalism, and empire. And the empire thing struck me because another contemporary example, George W. Bush came out after Biden withdrew from Afghanistan and was saying, well, what about the women? What about the women in Afghanistan? And that is another, I think, great manifestation of this dynamic, or not great, but great example of this dynamic that you're describing.
Absolutely. And especially when it comes to women in the Middle East, that has been a major thread actually for 130, 40 years, that it is the goal of white women to help save women from supposedly less civilized societies. The theorist Gayatri Spivak put it really well in the 1980s. She said it's the rhetoric of white women trying to save brown women from brown men. And it ends up actually just reinforcing the idea that the US is a beacon of progress and white civilization, and that you can use feminism as not just a cover for imperialism, but an explicit rationale for imperialism.
Yes, it's totally twisted, but I mean that is a view that a lot of people hold. Like during the Afghanistan war, I believe there were protests about save women from the Taliban by women in this country, and it is very, very narrow. And I guess I do want to now dive into the chapters of your book where you do this great thing where you pair a white feminist from a time or a topic with a black or indigenous or trans feminist of a similar period, and you highlight these contrasts. So I guess we can start with this first example, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Frances E.W. Harper. Can you talk about their stories and how they contrast and converge?
Yeah, I was really interested in this book in not just telling a critique of white feminism, but showing that white feminism has actually been sidestepping a vibrant form of feminism for true equality all along. And so the first chapter contrasting Stanton is particularly dramatic, I think, because Stanton is often considered, with her and Susan B. Anthony, her compatriot in the movement, as the founders of feminism. And as the most primary significant feminist activists of their time. But Stanton and Anthony both, in the wake of Reconstruction, actually reinforced racism as a way to further their own their own aims. And that's because after Reconstruction, Black men were awarded the right to vote, but not white women. And Stanton in particular gave many, many racist stump speeches where she used all kinds of derogatory language and said things like, you are letting the most ignorant, debased, degraded elements of society vote, but you are not letting your pure, white, potentially Mayflower descendant wives who are vote, and therefore you're denying a moral force in society. She's the name we have. She's the statue we have in Central Park. And yet there was always another kind of feminism that I think is especially exemplified by the poet Frances E.W. Harper, who was a person many people probably haven't heard of, even though she was a writer who sold 50,000 books in the 1860s, which is an astonishing number for that era. And she raised so much money from her books and her lecture tours that she actually was a major funding source for the Underground Railroad. She gave hundreds and hundreds of lectures a year on women's rights and women's rights as a partner of a post-Reconstruction movement for Blacks to gain land, literacy, and liberation was her framework. Hers was a framework for Black self-sufficiency and resilience and sustainability that meant actually getting control of some of the means of production. It was quite different from a message of the purity and morality of white women that Stanton offered. And yet Harper has been largely erased from feminist history outside of some academic circles.
And is that because of the intersectional feminists? Or I mean, I guess I'm asking you to editorialize a bit, but how would you, one, we herald our white members of history to a degree that's very odd and also racist. But also, would you say that that's a largely deliberate suppression of that kind of feminism because of the multi-pronged nature of that feminism and how many things it challenges, including capitalism?
I think so, right? We're so accustomed to the idea that feminism means the belief in gender equality, that when feminism comes along with all these other campaigns also, it looks like, well, that's a Black woman's issue. Instead of, oh no, this is a feminism that's actually recognizing if we are going to redress the effects of slavery in the US, that means actually changing our structure of social relations, of our economy, of the idea that you can sacrifice entire populations for the bottom line. It looks a lot more complicated than feminism. And what's fascinating is that suppression, as when you look at the historical record, you can actually look exactly when and where it happened. We don't have to make conjectures about, it probably got sidestepped. We can actually see, yes, it got excluded. And that's because the first time that anyone thought there could be such a thing as a history of feminism or the women's movement was when none other than Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony themselves sat down in the 1880s to write the history of the women's movement. And they produced a 4-volume work that has become the set of records for historians up till now about what feminism looked like. And they deliberately left Harper out of the volume. They had so many battles with her on platform stages of conventions around the country that they left her out, and instead they really elevated Sojourner Truth, and they turned Sojourner Truth into a figure who only supported women and left out her critiques of racism. And actually, we even used versions of Sojourner Truth's speeches that were written by white women and made her sound like a plantation mammy, when in fact she was a speaker of standard English and was not from the South. And the original transcriptions of her speeches look nothing like the anti-woman version of Sojourner Truth we've inherited today from Stanton and Anthony.
That is, I mean, unbelievable. I mean, it is believable, but it's just unreal. Like, and two, how deliberate. You wrote about how deliberate Stanton's pivot really was to racism is interesting as well. Can you flesh that out?
Yeah, what's interesting about her pivot is that there were there were preludes there all along. She had long supported the idea that women needed the vote because they were the most moral, upright figures of society. And when they fully joined the democratic process, the idea was that they would help redeem the nation as a whole. From her very first speech to the New York State Legislature, she established her own authority as a Mayflower descendant and a descendant of a Revolutionary War hero. So she really leaned into the fact that she was what she called, blue-blooded, and was belonged to the richest family in town. And
that sounds a little white supremacy-y in and of itself.
Exactly. I mean, she was also an abolitionist, right? But this is a kind of abolition that supports the end of slavery, but isn't willing to go all the way to eradicating racism as a structure. But after 1865, then it became much more a battle. Susan B. Anthony said things like, "I will cut off my right hand before I give the vote to Black men before women." And she had long been a partner and collaborator with Frederick Douglass. But when she started giving speeches, major convention speeches, railing against immigrants from China, immigrants from Ireland, against Sambo was a term she used regularly, and actually joined partnership with a very notorious white supremacist newspaper magnate. Then she lost many of her allies, and people like Frederick Douglass and Francis Harper actually broke away from Stanton and Anthony and formed a whole new organization that fought for women's rights alongside Black rights, because Stanton and Anthony's organization really became about white rights above all. One of their proteges actually would even say in her stump speeches, "White supremacy will be strengthened by women's suffrage."
And so it's a deliberate political pivot, and the sadness of it is that did lead to some success, and would it be fair to say that is the birth of white feminism today?
Yes, absolutely. And what's so harmful about it is that so often it's deemed the birth of feminism, right? Instead of the birth of white feminism alongside this other feminism led by people like Harper and to some degree Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass, and others, which we could now call the birth of intersectional feminism, even though that term intersectional feminism wasn't actually coined until the 1980s by the legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw.
So I guess let's move a little bit forward. I want to go through a lot of these examples, but let's talk about Harriet Beecher Stowe versus Harriet Jacobs in this time period. Tell us a little bit about the way in which I guess I don't know how to describe it, but there was a contrast in the way that white versus Black feminists were owning their own power to a degree. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Harriet Beecher Stowe, of course, wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, which was the second best-selling novel of the entire 19th century in the United States. And it's a novel that really positions white women as the saviors of enslaved people, that they will be the teachers, trainers, really discipliners of their servants and of the enslaved, and that's part of her vision of abolition. Versus Harriet Jacobs, who is another really compelling figure, extraordinary figure actually, and someone who it's amazing we don't have 5 movies about Harriet Jacobs' life, because among many things that she did was when she self-emancipated from slavery to run away from her enslaver, she actually hid in a tiny attic space, so small she couldn't even stand up. And she hid there for 7 years until she had the opportunity to take a boat north and escape North Carolina. She wanted to tell her story to support the abolition movement in the 1850s. and had a colleague approach Harriet Beecher Stowe to say, hey, could you write this person's story? Harriet Jacobs escaped in part because of the sexual abuse she was suffering at the hands of her enslaver. And they thought, well, Harriet Beecher Stowe might be the right person to bring that view of the sexual abuse element of slavery into the national eye. Instead, Harriet Beecher Stowe said, thank you for telling me these details of this amazing story of her hiding in an attic for 7 years. I'm going to use these details in my next book. Goodbye. And then never replied to any of the increasingly desperate letters afterward saying, no, we're not asking you to steal this woman's story. And Harriet Jacobs was so incensed that she actually wrote her own story. Like, she was lucky enough that she was literate from youth. And it is now, deemed the most important woman's slave autobiography. It was she's the first Black woman to publish her own story. And she's actually literally published it herself because she couldn't find a publisher to support it. And it's a brilliant example of the kind of self-determination that guided intersectional feminism. And meanwhile, Harriet Beecher Stowe becomes the sort of patron saint of abolition. And then after Reconstruction, she and her husband bought the largest orange plantation in Florida so that she herself could experiment with disciplining and civilizing the formerly enslaved. And they're really dramatic examples of that sort of self-led versus white maternalist version of feminism that tried to enact a literal theft.
And that brings us back to what we were talking about with Afghanistan, where there is this and it's just a thread through colonialism as well. We are going to civilize this population, and it's all inherently very narcissistic, of course. And I don't want to, we had someone write in to ask you a question, and so I don't want to move past that, even though we're going a little bit backwards about Stanton. Margot from Mass writes in, I had read that Stanton and the early conferences were originally urged to work for suffrage by Frederick Douglass, and they didn't agree on it as a goal until Douglass encouraged them to fight for it as a means to get other rights. Is that true?
It is absolutely true. It's really one conference. The conference is often considered the start of women's rights in the US. And this is the famous 1848 Seneca Falls Convention. And Stanton had said, we want to support the fight for women to vote. And nobody would support it until Douglass stood up. And Douglass was the only Black person in the entire many 100-person convention. And he said, I will not fight for my rights without fighting for the rights of women. And then the vote passed. But it wouldn't have passed in 1848 without Douglass, which made her later betrayal of him and of the rights of African Americans especially poignant.
I mean, it's especially disgusting. I mean,
yeah.
True. That is so right. Thank you for that question, Margot. I want to move a little bit forward because I mentioned the Margaret Sanger example earlier when we were talking about reproductive rights and when you were mentioning how these white supremacist sites are in favor of abortion but only for non-white people to make the population more pure, more white, etc. Talk a little bit about the contrast between Margaret Sanger and Dr. Dorothy Farabee, if I'm pronouncing it.
Yeah, it's a contrast that has a lot of consequence for us today. And that contrast can be summed up in present day terms as a difference between fighting just for reproductive choice, which is represented by Sanger, or reproductive justice, which is represented by Farabee. So what those terms mean is that reproductive choice is a movement that puts one goal above all. And that goal is enabling women to prevent pregnancy. For now, that means through contraception or abortion. In Sanger's day, that meant through contraception. This was her only goal, and it was an especially complicated goal for her because she didn't understand it only as a means of women's choice and women's self-determination. She understood it also as a eugenic goal, as a way to cleanse and improve the quality, the biological quality of the population. And that's because she firmly believed throughout her life that 25% of the world's people were not fit to reproduce. They were of inferior quality, genetically, and especially in terms of mental and physical disability. Her platform of eugenics wasn't actually especially racist. It wasn't a goal of eliminating non-white people. It was a goal of eliminating disability, and disability was a massive category for her, as for many others in her time period. It included things like alcoholism or poverty, or many conditions we would no longer now consider to be about biological situation. But so she wanted birth control to prevent pregnancy as a tool of improving the nation, and also of enabling some women to get to decide whether or not that they are pregnant. But again, it's a goal that puts sort of like restriction above all. And it's a goal that understands that it positions some women's pregnancies as undesirable, not just for themselves, but for the nation as a whole. And she was involved and cooperated with a lot of the nation's leading eugenicists to make birth control more available. The other approach is represented by Dr. Dorothy Farabee, who is a Black physician and led really important health access projects in the Mississippi Delta for sharecroppers especially. And her goal was three parts. It was, yes, helping women prevent pregnancy, but also helping poor women be able to achieve pregnancy in the first place, in light of things like increasing eugenic and sterilization campaigns. And then third, of helping poor women raise children in healthy environments. So it's a more broad-based goal of reproductive justice, as it's now called by Retta Ross, a term she coined in the 1990s, that acknowledges that especially for poor women and Black and Latinx women, the largest barriers to reproductive health and justice are not contraception. It's about access to healthy housing, healthcare, jobs that pay living wages. It's a much more broad-based goal that reflects that broader goal of intersectional feminism altogether.
Yeah, I mean, and that is obviously like has stood the test of time. I mean, these people that you cite and that you contrast, I'll admit the white people are the ones I learned about in history and the ones that I have a better understanding of, and some of these counterexamples, that's why this is so helpful. It doesn't, we didn't learn about that. And so, I want to just move a little bit to other examples just before we run out of time, because some of these are really great, including Janice Raymond and Sandy Stone on, and this is applicable to the current day in discussions of TERFs, and J.K. Rowling is the most obvious example, but this is very applicable for modern feminist discourse here. Tell us a little bit about those two feminists and what honestly it says about modern day feminist discourse around trans women.
Yeah, it was really important to me to show how the logic of anti-trans feminists, who argue that trans women are not women, is actually part of white feminism, even though it's less obvious because we most often think of white feminism in terms of its racism. But there is a subliminal racism in the position of TERFs. And so I look at especially the role of the trans musician and sound engineer and activist Sandy Stone, who was part of a really important collective, a lesbian recording artists collective that sold hundreds of thousands of records in the 1970s and 80s called Olivia Records. And then Janice Raymond, who is an academic and author of probably the most important TERF book called The Transsexual Empire, who supported a campaign to run Sandy Stone, a trans woman, out of Olivia Records in the 70s. And it was a successful campaign. And we often talk about and recognize that anti-trans feminists are what we call biological essentialists, right? They say sex is real. You're born a sex. It's very tidy and clear, and it can never change, right? Biology is destiny, is that kind of logic, which flies in the face of research that shows that anything up to 2% of births are intersex to some degree, right? But it's an insistence that biology is extremely tidy and sex is always straightforward and set in stone. It was absolutely true that TERFs are biological essentialists, but TERFs are also experience essentialists. And what I mean by that is that they say a trans woman can't be a woman also because she didn't have the experience of being a woman growing up. She didn't have the universal experience of menstruation or the universal experience of sexual harassment or any of the other elements of being in a female body. The problem is that there is no such thing as that universal female experience, right? And this is one of the points that Audre Lorde has made over and over again in her lifetime, right? Like Black women have 5 times the rate of breast cancer, of sexual assault and abuse, right? One of the things that Harriet Jacobs was illuminates versus Harriet Beecher Stowe is that, in the 1860s, what is the position of being a woman? If you're Harriet Jacobs, you might be hiding in an attic for 7 years. If you're an enslaved Black woman being abused by your enslaver, if you're a white woman, you might have a completely different set of experiences. But TERFs ignore all that and say, no, there is just one way to be a woman, and trans women aren't that version, so they can't be women. But that is reinscribing that universal woman. And the other piece of it is that they also often position men as oppressors, right? And that women need to be protected from men. It's a very simplified view of power where men oppress and women are oppressed. And that's kind of the end of the story for understanding contemporary politics. And that, again, is something that is a lot like white feminism, because if we look back to the Combahee River Collective, famous intersectional feminist group in the 1970s, they made it really clear back in the mid-70s. Often for us as Black women, they said, Black men are more of our allies than white women because we're fighting more concerns than just sex. And that's the kind of dynamic that TERFs can't see. They only see sex and they put everything else secondary. And that's what white feminism is.
Right. And then the point you make about biological essentialism, that is a step away from a white supremacist perspective, right? Where we are these static things and our environment or our skin color or the gender that we have been assigned at birth, that is natural. And anything unnatural is evil in and of itself. And that is very much in keeping with these themes that you've been discussing today.
I think that's absolutely right. And, my specialty as a scholar is in 19th century race science and the beginnings of a belief in biological essentialism about sex. And it actually turns out that when people got really, really attached to the sex binary, it was as a result of race science. And that literally it was race scientists who said, white people have evolved the sex binary and nobody else has. So you're absolutely right to draw that connection.
And the other thing I want to point out is like the idea that a woman's experience, that there is a universal woman's experience, ignores, as you say, all the class and race components to it as well, but ignores the often very traumatic experience of growing up trans in a society that is immensely hostile to that, where that is a set of its own unique experiences and trauma, and then someone like J.K. Rowling has very publicly basically devalued that or said that that is separate and distinct, when obviously there is no way to make that delineation except if you're trying to reach a conclusion that is bigoted.
Absolutely right. TERFs are insistent that the largest victims of gender are women. And the only victims, but any kind of fight toward like who is the biggest victim is not usually going to turn out very well. That's not a very strong place from which to build a movement. But that is one of the many turf errors. Absolutely.
Right. All right. Well, then let's conclude talking about the final, I believe, contrast that you drew between someone like Sheryl Sandberg, author of Lean In, Facebook executive or former Facebook executive, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who everyone is, of course, familiar with here. And that is a contrast really between individual leaning in, right, which is you get yours in the corporate boardroom, right? You make sure you make all the money that you can, versus solidarity and working with others. And promoting, she openly talks about intersectionality, AOC does. So talk a little bit about that, and then we can really kind of bring it full circle to where we are at in 2022, which is hard. Yeah,
I love that AOC says things like, I'm not running from the left, I'm running from the bottom. And to me, that is a clear indication of her intersectional politics. And absolutely, she does talk about intersectionality explicitly. Of course, AOC is also of the left, right? But I think she makes that distinction because sometimes the left can be framed as a position that puts class above everything else, right? In the way that feminism is often framed as putting sex above everything else. And she wanted to really signal that's not her position. She's coming from a place that finds race and class to be fully intertwined, and gender inequality to be another thread in that mixture. So, and one of the examples of how her response to those things is to fight for structural change is that famous speech she gave after Representative Yoho called her a bitch as she was going up the stairs to the Capitol. And she decided, instead of just swallowing it or instead of responding on an individual level, she would give this impromptu speech in front of the House about the structural position of sexism, and especially people working in service jobs and the kind of constant sexual harassment and demeaning behavior that they're facing. And of course, her linking up with the ever-expanding squad to fight for a coalitional politics. And that is one of the main lessons of intersectional feminism. It's that the best critique of power is not from the top. It's not about getting yourself to the top. The best critique of power is from the vantage of the bottom. This is one of the things that Combahee River Collective laid out, and the AOC really lives out. But because from the bottom is where you can see all the different layers that make up our power structures in society. But then to actually fight from the bottom, you need to work in coalition with others. And that doesn't mean having perfect alignment in your politics, but being able to work across positions of identity and sometimes also platform to find specific targets you're working on together. And I think AOC's sometime partnership with the Democrats, often partnership with Democratic Socialists, but then also really crafting her own positions is a great example of that coalitional politics at work. Sandberg, of course, is the opposite. Her view is, she says things like, when women lead half our companies and countries and men lead half our homes, then we'll have true equality. That's that white feminist version of equality that imagines if you put women at the top of a hierarchy, somehow she will sanctify that hierarchy, right? And I think it's really fascinating how much Sandberg talks about her own emotion and her own fallibility and her own tears. And I really connect it to that phenomenon of white women's tears, only in her case, it's like her tears somehow prove her humanity, that sanctify the whole project of corporate capitalism that she's trying to wrestle control over. But that's just changing the face of it. It's not changing any of the structures.
It's like the meme of the pink drones or the CNBC segment that went viral of how all of the defense the big defense contractor CEOs are women now. It's like, oh, okay, I mean, wow. But yeah, that's very much the dynamic that you're talking about here. Well, I really appreciate your time today. I know we went a little over, but I really appreciate it. Kyla Schuller, the book is called The Trouble Oh, here it is. The Trouble with White Women, a Counterhistory of Feminism. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks so much, Emma.
All right, folks. We are out of time, I believe, but that was excellent, truly. I'll never get tired of that topic, to be honest.
Yeah, and the structure of that book where you contrast, a white feminist with a non-white feminist that was overlooked, very smart structure.
I agree.
Particularly for the purpose of a podcast, but just generally, that's very interesting. And because it's like you want to historicize accurately these sorts of like problematic, mythic white feminists that we've had before. But if you just do that, you're still kind of reifying the problem where you're just focusing on them, right?
Yeah.
And you need to actually we need to create basically a new canon of leaders in the struggle.
Right. I mean, I talking about AOC as like this intersectional figure reminds me, the worst question I ever asked her was like, I asked her about identity politics. I must have been like 24 or whatever. I was young, and she did not like the question, I think. And I talked to her about it after, and she was like, yeah, I mean, everyone asks me about that, and I don't love it. I was like, great. Great. I mean, it was fine, but I wish that I nailed every question. I did not want to be another one of those idiots asking her about that. But, we live and we learn. Regardless, we are going to head into the fun half shortly. But first, Matt, I know you had a marathon Left Reckoning last night.
Yeah, so we did about 5 hours of Left Reckoning, the first main show with Ben Burgess. We also talk about MLK stuff, different reactions, but the main meat of it was Ben Burgess on his new Hitchens book. So we did that, and 3 hours on the post game.
Wow.
We busted out Johnny Walker Black Label because that was Hitchens' favorite drink, but we get into like where he went wrong. If he would have been IDW, I contend that the IDW wouldn't exist as it does now if Hitchens didn't exist, but also that the IDW couldn't exist if Hitchens still existed, because Hitchens, to name one thing, was one of the people woke scolding Charles Murray about being racist back in the 90s. So he wouldn't have he would have put the kibosh on like Sam Harris's little jaunt down race science lane and different things like that. So there's obviously a lot to talk about with about Hitchens, because we were doing it till 1 a.m. last night. But
wow.
If you want that full post-game, patreon.com/leftreckoning.
That sounds really fun. Shooting the shit with Ben is always fun.
Yeah, and I don't drink a whole lot anymore because I've stopped going to bars, obviously, for coronavirus generally, and I don't do a whole lot of like drinking at home. But I'm a little bit hungover today, so I'm needing these CBD gummies.
Hair of the dog, aka just alcoholism.
But we should have Brandon and Matt joining us now. I'm curious to see how Binder's feeling, because he was. You guys there?
Still connecting.
They're both there, but.
With that said, we'll be taking your calls in the fun half for sure. 646-257-3920. But here is Brandon and here is Matt. There we go.
Hello. Wow, at the same time, we're like synchronized today.
Yeah. And Brandon discovered the G chat today, so he's been sending some fun messages.
Yeah, I saw that way after. I saw that like all these messages from like 45 minutes, an hour ago. I'm like, whoa, it's actually being used, the G chat?
I didn't realize we had a group chat. This is the first group chat I've been in that,
We're pretty active in the one with when Sam's here, but I feel like we're more lackadaisical because Sam asked for like extra information a good amount, and we're just flying by the seat of our pants.
Exactly.
Matt, how are you feeling?
I'm doing much better than last week. Last week was the worst. That was something else. Back is still sore though. It's weird. I thought it'd be better by now, but it's definitely not as bad as last week. I'm back in action, at least for the audience. There is a Doomed show tonight. I did a stream on Tuesday as well. Tonight on Doomed, youtube.com/Matt Binder and on twitch.tv/Matt Binder. I'll be talking to Jason Campbell of Media Matters, and we will be walking through a timeline of Steven Crowder's history of just always happening to just work around YouTube strike policy. Just how he always gets away with racking up these strikes. But interestingly enough, he games it in a way where they never quite get racked up to the point where he actually pays a permanent consequence.
Interesting. I wonder why that is, and I guess I'll have to tune into Doomed to find out.
Yeah.
Brandon, what's happening over on the discourse?
Nothing yet, but I've been trying to get my crew together and to form the Voltron that is our podcast. So, we're gonna get it together in the new year. I promise everybody.
All right.
That was my real New Year's resolution that I didn't want to share, but we're getting it together. We're not as professional as this outfit. I'm sorry to say.
All right. Well, then with that, we will head into the fun house. 646-257-3920. We'll be taking your calls, chatting with you, playing some clips. See you there.
You are in for it. All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun house.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it to my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Cedar! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Denner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break. That's fucking nonsense.
See white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We're back.
Oh, all right. Yeah, I was just telling
Why don't you tell us then?
Yeah, so there's this I think it was a Hungarian folk singer.
I think it was Czech.
Or Czech. Yes, that was
Czech.
it. Like Czechoslovakia or Czech, whatever.
Czech Republic.
Czech Republic. Yeah. Oh, geez. I'm like talking like I'm from 20 years ago. Even more, actually, 30 years ago. Czech folk singer who was, I don't know if anti-vax is a proper term. Her son, I think, said that.
Oh, wow.
I guess it is. Yeah. Anti-vax. But her son said that he and his dad were vaxxed. She just did not want to get vaxxed, and she purposefully spent time with them when they got COVID to get COVID herself. Like she wanted COVID on purpose for like natural immunity. And apparently she was fine for like, just like the vaccinated part of her family was fine. And then like a week went by, she was outside, according to her son, walking the dog or something. And she said her back started to hurt. She went inside to lay down, and then moments later she died.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So apparently this back thing could possibly be serious business with COVID. Like if you have, like, it seems like it's part of the, it's not just me getting a sore back or throwing my back out and I just happened to have COVID. It seems like I was more susceptible to it, or it's even connected even deeper than that. I don't know. But it seems like this is a real thing where people with who are getting COVID, at least in the more recent variants, it seems, are all talking about having back issues.
The irresponsibility of folks who say it's just a cold, it's just, and everyone's gonna get it, like Jimmy Dore, or the people who
yeah, no, it's disgusting. I mean, Matt, sorry,
permanent beef, I guess. That's all I gotta say for those folks.
Right.
And I was gonna say, like, the everyone's gonna get it, like, standpoint. It's amazing how we like switched from even pretending like we were gonna try to mitigate the COVID spread to like, well, I guess everyone's gonna get it now, as a complete or rather allowing for a complete abdication of like the responsibility of our government institutions, like to stop everyone from getting the disease. Like, I mean, honestly, it's just like we've seen other countries like prevent the spread from just like taking over their entire country. And it's just like embarrassing that Americans will pretend like it was impossible to do that here.
I will say, over the past few weeks, I have said myself that it's looking like everybody's going to get it. But when I say it, it's not because I'm throwing my hands up in the air and just like saying, come on, guys, get over it. I'm saying it because in direct response to what we're doing about it, it does seem like everybody's going to get it, unfortunately. Well, like we're not doing anything.
You say everybody in America because you can't say everybody in South Korea.
That's what I mean. Right.
Well, I mean, we have some people who are like arguing that China has to like lift all of their standards because it embarrasses them how bad we've done. But I mean, China's not the only country that has prevented it from like absolutely ravaging their population. It's just a sliding scale, in terms of like how closely you are to America on that kind of like personal freedom and capitalism like matrix. It depends on how bad you did. And I mean, a lot of it is just cope. Unfortunately, I mean, I think that Matt's point is important. The people who are like championing the everyone's going to get it eventually, like trope, or I guess talking point, at least need to acknowledge that, because our country's government is uniquely unable to deal with a public health catastrophe, and that should be very worrying, as opposed to like, oh, COVID just infects everyone magically.
Yeah, if you're a person who doesn't like vax mandates, you need a state response like China, who also doesn't have vax mandates. It's completely voluntary over there, but they have done everything else above and beyond to actually create a situation where you can do that sort of thing.
Right.
I feel like we did more about Havana syndrome, the fake disease affecting CIA agents, than we did about COVID-19.
Do you know how fake it has to be for the CIA's internal report to say, yeah, it's probably fake, like they did this morning? Yeah. But let's I'm gonna read
that actually makes me start to believe that it is a real thing.
Right?
They're lying to us
now. Dave Parrott says, email, you shouldn't snitch people who are watching you on the Majority Report on YouTube on their PCs with our Excel report. That meant to say Emma. With our Excel report at the ready. Tisk tisk. I know, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make that so obvious. Join DSA and Unionize says, thinking back to how the congressional GOP started its hard right turn after its big losses in 2006, does anyone think that there could be some silver linings to our fights inside the Democratic Party with swing state losses this year? I mean, the Republicans' hard right turn was, I think, it was just a different flavor of what they already were, in my opinion. They just they leaned in more to their base. I don't know what the silver lining is. It's just a different playing field, too, when no matter what Republicans do, they represent money and they represent capitalists. And so the Democrats left turn is a lot harder. You're carrying a much heavier load when you're challenging power structures.
I mean, whether Democrats are going to get washed in an election season or if they're going to actually do well, the job is pretty much the same, is to support the candidates that are out there doing things that you actually want to see done. And like, also understand that they're probably not going to all sweep into power and deliver you socialism. But like, as far as like what you can get from election season, like it's to try to get certain places, people in power, like, I mean, local independent socialists are my kind of favorite avenue now. But, you know, and it's also an opportunity to get message out, but it's, you know, there are limits to what you can actually accomplish in any given election season. Particularly when the Democrats are this, you know, unpopular.
Word Deluxe writes in, New Matt, a few weeks ago you recommended a podcast series on the Kennedy assassination. I didn't catch the name. Would you mind sharing it?
Yeah, death is just around the corner.
Death is just around the corner. Okay. J-Man Raps writes in, big win last night for the highly arrogant New York Rangers. Yep, I was at the game last night. The different crowd than I was at the Knicks game the other night. Which, like, again, these were gifts, and I probably would have not gone in Omicron, but they were tickets that were gifted to me over the holiday season, or I gifted one of them. But different people much more concerned about COVID at the Knicks game than the Ranger game. Different demographics of people as well. It makes me feel a little ashamed when I go to a hockey game and it's just so white, but you know, I mean, I can't help that I love the team. Bourbon Socialist, Emma's Majority Report continues to upstage the beta male Sam Ceder. Banger topic today. It was so enlightening. Thank you. Thank you.
If we're going to talk about sports this early on in the show, I got to.
I'm reading IMs. I did not.
Hold on, I got a segue here for you.
Okay.
And we have to get to this clip because I did not know about this. It's number 8 on the sound sheet. I want to get to it now because I don't want to skip it. I don't want to miss it. This is amazing to me. I can't believe what I'm reading on the sound sheet. I've not heard this yet, but your description of this on the sound sheet is incredible.
Yes, and it's true. So Bradley did not editorialize when he wrote this up for us. If anybody people may have come across a guy named Darren Rovell. He's all over social media. He's often commenting on a lot of like NFL topics, I guess, but he's widely known as very cringe, I will say.
Yeah, I mean, I call him like a galloping personality disorder because it's basically fixated on like the value of everything and the price of nothing sort of guy.
Yeah.
Right, that's Darren Rovell.
Yeah. And
the price of everything, the value of nothing.
Consistently, he posts horny on Maine, that kind of guy. And in this instance, Bradley's already laughing.
So just to set up before we play this, his actual like response to what got him in trouble is he tweeted out this: my most cherished piece of Martin Luther King memorabilia are pages from the warden's log books from the Birmingham jail in 1963 when he wrote letter to from a Birmingham jail. King
warden's
King signed in and out of the mail 12 times. It was sold by the family of the Birmingham jail warden. So that's who got the money from this, and that's one of his most prized possessions. So anyway, that's just, and so people were, responding to this, say, hey, that's kind of fucked up a little bit. Maybe you should donate some of this giant collection of yours. But anyway, we can play.
Well, so
he has 2 million followers on Twitter too. So we're not talking about some like randos for people who aren't familiar. Like he's a big name in like sports business commentary, it seems.
Yes. Martin Luther King Jr. Day is a surprisingly difficult holiday for most people, and I don't necessarily understand why, because no one forces you to say anything. I don't even think I posted that day.
But this guy loves to post, and he loves to say things, including he doubles down on his MLK memorabilia here, and here he is in a Miami fan Twitter space, just waxing poetically about all the MLK memorabilia he owns.
Explain it to the fan base so everybody can get on the same page.
Sure, I have over 9 MLK signed items. I am a humongous fan of what he's done, and over the last 7 years, I've collected a lot of things. It's not only MLK; it's a lot of Black history. I own a Rosa Parks signed NAACP card. So it was pretty shocking today how I was called racist when I am a student and lover of Black history and it was I never expected the reaction that I got today.
I own the literal billy club that they beat him with, and you call me a racist, sir? You call me a racist?
Wait, he's not done. He's got more to say.
Oh, he's got more.
Oh, let's
the whole trophy case.
I'm sorry if people think that a white man can't enjoy Black history.
All right.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I really am. I'm sorry if people think that a white man can't love Martin Luther King. But to me, that seems pretty counterintuitive.
What?
You got me?
Yeah, they got you. Hey, Footballville, you have a question?
He anticipated your what, Matt? That's how not racist he is. He anticipated your incredulity.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair. Like, say you're a guy that owns, I don't know, a ton of Nazi memorabilia. You're like, oh, I'm a historian of World War II. I love the Jews, so I own a lot of Nazi memorabilia. Wait, like, no, he owns the impetus for this was that he owns something, the logs of the warden from when MLK was jailed.
Well, I mean, the problem.
Emma, did you forget about the Rosa Parks rookie card? I mean, come on.
Very rare, very rare. I mean, that's gonna go for like $5,000 on eBay.
But it's a little. Go ahead.
He knows what's going on with. There's a discomfort because he's using a euphemism when he says, "I can't enjoy Black history or be a student." Like, what you're owning it, you're possessing it, you're commodifying it, right? Like, it's becoming your possession. Like, I have this tweet here. This is from the original response to that. Like, King signed in and out of this his mail 12 times. Somebody said, "Fuck you, donate this immediate," and then someone's like, "Sell it, donate." They get a. Somebody says, "One MLK signature is worth a ton. I can't imagine something of this significance. Give that away for free. No one, regardless of skin color, is that dumb," right? This is the type of people Ravel represents. Ravel responds to that tweet saying, "I offered to put it on loan at the Smithsonian. They required me to donate it." And people, I'm like, yeah, you should fucking donate it. Donate it.
Yeah, maybe like loving Black history, actually showing a true appreciation for it, is not hoarding it for your own financial gain. I don't know.
I think it's a little bit on the nose. That's a metaphor for, profiting off of Black trauma in America, I guess. It's a little on the nose. It could only be better if it was like an NFT. Then that would really be like, taking it to the next level of where we are.
If you make it an NFT, but in the process, the actual like physical artifact gets destroyed forever.
Yeah, like how like the Star Trek transporters work.
He rips up Rosa Parks' NAACP card as he logs on and makes it an NFT. Like, now it's digitalized forever and everybody can own it.
It's worth even more now that it doesn't exist.
It was so, for me, the most, the one of the most amazing things was the way he was just talking about well, first of all, he's talking about MLK and Rosa Parks as if they were like brand name sports stars, like they were out there to build a brand. Second of all, talking about the items, the historical artifacts, as if they were like, again, sports collectibles. Like, get your MLK souvenirs here. What about your rare Harriet Tubman collector's items? Like, just so weird. Like, that was, of course, the idea of an individual buying and selling and owning these things as like, collectibles. For obviously to him, it's probably an asset too. Let's be honest. If someone was to offer him a lot of money for it, he'd be very happy, because I would venture that's part of the point of buying that type of stuff, at least for a private collector.
Yeah, I think that MLK Day is really interesting because like Martin Luther King Jr. is like the, America approved like voice and standard for like civil rights era. And so everyone takes it upon themselves to support MLK as a way to like pretend they care about Black people or pretend they're not racist. And we just have so many different, displays of what people think being not racist look like in this country, and most of them are just like, I'm going to quote MLK, and then some people are just like, I collect his memorabilia like I collect anything else. It's very American. It's a very American holiday, in its exploitation of civil rights. And honestly, there's pretension that people cared about MLK the way they care about, or rather that people back then were as in support of Martin Luther King Jr. as they pretend like they are now, is interesting, especially when we have politicians who like post, or like institutions that post, like who are directly involved in like his, you know, like, or rather opposing him at the time, pretending like, oh yeah, like they just weren't there at the time. Like, I mean, it's just weird to have like the CIA and FBI be like, you know, Martin Luther King Jr. would want you to, you know, volunteer for service at your local FBI recruitment offices. And then people, you know, respond that like you told him to kill himself. And then people go like, what?
But we weren't the exact people that did that. I mean, we were playing it the other day, Republican politicians being like, this isn't, or it was Geraldo Rivera talking about voter ID laws. This isn't Bull Connor. That's not us. As if they have to be, you know, put on like a 1960s accent and participate in racism in the exact form and way that it was done 60 plus years ago for racism to actually be in their hearts.
Well, I mean, that's the interesting thing about that, is because like racism becomes part of this dichotomy that exists between like a present America that is like better than it was in the past, and, you know, like our past racist America. And, you know, using the FBI as an example and COINTELPRO and stuff like that, everyone who knows about it is always assured that things don't still work that way, but can't really point to anything that would, you know, make them believe that, other than it was something that happened in the past. It's like, well, yeah, that was a thing the FBI did, but they're not still doing that. And then like, well, why would you think they're not still doing it, other than that it's not literally 1964 or something?
Well, we had this discussion. I mean, Brandon, you might have been actually in studio when this article came out about the, you know, the FBI infiltrating BLM protests during George Floyd. That's commonplace. And then they have the gall to tweet out something about MLK, or like, and then the commodification of it also just boggles my mind when you have Excedrin PM or whatever, or Tide detergent. Like, MLK would have wanted you to keep your clothes clean as hell. I mean, it's just he's like become a patron.
Why do you think they were spraying them with the hoses? Obviously, it was all about cleaning the clothes. Yeah, but he's become like the patron saint of like proving America has grappled with its racism and come out a better, even though, like, you know, they shot him. The FBI was involved, and people know that. And even like you were, I was in studio for that article. It's just another thing that people can tell themselves, like, as sort of a lazy moral story about like black and white moral tale. The past was black and racist in terms of like morality, not just in terms of, you know, black people, but in the you know, the present is better and slightly or not at all racist in the ways that it was in the past. And we know, I mean, honestly, it's very little has changed since the time of Martin Luther King Jr. in terms of like black wealth. In some ways, I think they've gotten worse. You know, they're trying to take away people's right to vote, just like they were back then. We've, you know, from the moment the Civil Rights Act was passed, just like the moment, you know, Roe v. Wade was passed, people have been trying to roll back those accomplishments.
Excuse me, Brandon, have you missed out on this brand new NFT income stream for people of color? I mean, it's blowing up.
Oh my gosh, I guess. I mean, but also to that point, not about the NFT.
That's one of the arguments crypto advocates like to push, because, you know, NFTs obviously have like I mean, look at the big ones like the Bored Apes. They obviously have like a strong fan base with, like, you know, street art people, and so like their argument is there's a lot of, you know, Black and Latino artists that are collecting these NFTs too and making money.
I will say, just to finish, I want to talk about the NFT thing, because there was another ape-based scam last week that I was very invested in learning about. But also, I mean, to the point Emma made before about like BLM and, you know, Martin Luther King Jr., like having this like mythologized figure of Martin Luther King Jr. who engaged in only nonviolent protests and was never in the way of, you know, the functioning of capital in any meaningful sense, the way people like to pretend BLM should be, you know, it just allows for, you know, mainstream discourse to exist on civil rights that is entirely divorced from the way it actually existed. And so like people are always being like held to a standard of MLK, you know, very sanitized MLK's civil rights era level of, you know, civil disobedience that we learn about in public schools. And we can see now they're still trying to like make you learn even less about it. And so that people are even less able to determine and understand that, oh no, the people who like are not in favor of BLM today are the same ones who would have been against MLK back in the day. Like nothing has changed other than like they've been allowed to pretend with MLK in the past that they are in favor of this sort of more pure, more, you know, civil anti-racist protesting. But to your ape point, there was another ape-based scam. Did you hear about this one? It was like the Big Daddy Ape Club was a rug pull, and it was the same people who did the last ape-based rug pull. Oh my God, I forget what that one was called too. And they ran off with like I think in total like almost $4 million worth of people's like ape coins money.
This is happening so much.
Oh, I did see this.
This is happening so often now that I honestly need to check which one you're talking about, because this is a common, like, it's just like a scam from the bottom, from the top down. Like, it's just unbelievable that people are just falling for this over and over and over.
What I found interesting about this one, because I was reading a lot of like Twitter threads about it, is that this particular ape-based scam was certified by these informal, like, I guess, crypto NFT like certification and like promotion, like basically them policing themselves in a certain way. And once the rug was pulled, even though they had been given this sort of like stamp of approval by the self-policing or NFT private corporations, like people who lost their money in that rug pull, like, were constantly trying to negotiate what their rights actually were within this space. And I saw like one of the verification like companies were like, well, you can file a lawsuit against, you know, the people who did this, and therefore we can release this information or some other shit. And it was like, everyone was like, they're not following the lawsuit. And I was like, but this is the whole private market, like, this is what that like private libertarian version of self-policing and self-regulating markets, pretends like is viable. That like once someone in a position to scam you scams you, you'll have this way to redress them through like civil litigation and like private industry, because why would they be able to keep doing this if, otherwise their business would fall apart? And it's like, because like they have an infinite number of suckers who they can keep, pretending like they can have an infinite number of suckers who they can keep presenting a different slightly modified version of apes to, who will fall for it every time. And so like the idea of self-policing just goes out the window the moment people actually lose their money, except for except to be like shouted down by people who didn't lose their money in that particular scam.
Right and
a lot of churn and burn.
Right. You brought up too, like their ideology behind it too, and how their set of laws, they don't even understand their own version of their ideology behind all this. Because you heard about the DAO, which is like the crypto,
the Dune thing,
the Dune book. Yeah. So this DAO, which is like the crypto version of like a crowdfunding group, they bought this rare Dune book. And now I'm not a Dune person. I don't know the details about this Dune book.
It is a copy. I do know details. It's a copy of the like, I guess you'd call it the spec script, including like storyboard illustrations for Jodorowsky's Dune that he was trying to produce back in like the 80s. There's a whole documentary on it. And there are only 7 of these spec scripts that went around to the various like major production companies in order like to basically sell the movie.
Right. So they bought this item, which would be, like for well above what it was supposed to go for, like 10 times the amount, millions and millions of dollars. Than what the auction house thought it was going to go for. And they thought that by buying this copy of this rare Dune book, that gave them the copyright to it. And they started planning making the movie as if they owned the writer's ideas and everything he wrote down. And they bought this book. Imagine going out and buying like, I don't know, think of a famous actor, their script on the set of whatever movie they were in. And you bought that script, and instead of just viewing it as a collectible, you said, now I can remake this movie. I have the right to remake this movie. Like, imagine, like, that's the thought process here. It's unbelievable.
It seems like, honestly, when I was reading about this too, that through their Discord, I was reading through like Discord like records as people were posting them. Like there was a lot of sort of miscommunication and like variable expectations about what this script was going to be used for and the value of it. Like some people were like, no, I really like Dune, and I was really just willing to purchase everything into it. Some people thought it was going to be some money making scheme that would allow them to like make a animated Newgrounds-esque, I can only assume like Lazy Lion infused like version of Dune. And obviously it doesn't do any of that. You can't even like do the basic thing like they wanted to do or said they wanted to do, which was like publish it publicly online as an NFT, because it doesn't give you the right to like reproduce it honestly in that function. So like it's just a lot of, I think the NFT world is of variable expectations between various levels of scammers, and sometimes it just like all falls on its head. Sorry if I'm like rambling. I was very excited about the apes again.
Now this is that's why I'm doing a podcast, which by the way, It was pushed back, obviously, because of I was sick. But the first interview is now in the bag. I am just doing some, finishing up some graphic and intro stuff. The podcast, the On Crypto, is on the way. I'll let you know when it drops. It should be, we're probably just like a week out at most.
We should make an NFT collection of civil rights leaders as like animals, some sort of like
as like furries.
I don't know. I was going to say apes, but that probably won't go over well. I mean, actually, it probably will go over pretty well in the NFT community, but outside of that community, it might be viewed as a little problematic.
Might be.
Might be.
All right, let's take a call, Beecher.
You can do
let's do that.
Yeah,
I can do rabbits, but they're civil rights people.
I could do CIA apes NFTs, so like where a bunch of like famous CIA agents are like as like types of great ape or less.
Yeah,
ape.
I'm afraid you just gave them a really good idea. You don't. I could already imagine CIA apes going huge on like OpenSea where they sell NFTs. Unbelievable. Don't
if
give
you
me
throw the
ideas.
word, frankly, if you throw the word ape in front of something, it's probably going to do well on that site. So I can't, just not use the word ape.
I mean,
my
Brandon,
day-to-day conversation.
Brandon, if you want to, you can go to like Fiverr right now, hire an artist for like $100 and get him to make 10,000 CIA apes, computer generated as well, because obviously that's part of it. And then you can put it out there and you can say like, help support the artist, as in me, the guy who paid the artist $100, and I'll make the tens of thousands or millions of dollars. That's what all these things are. It's unbelievable.
That's way too much work for me.
Let's take a call.
All right, let's do it. 647, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Warren from Toronto.
Hey, Warren from Toronto. What would you like to talk about?
First, just wanted to say it's good to hear you're feeling better from COVID, Matt. I got Omicron, and it's just another, and I'm better now. I didn't have time to get, a booster. So I had, 2-3 days of it just being horrible. And it just, during that time, it really made me realize how, first off, what psychopaths the original natural immunity, herd immunity before the vaccines came people are. But even now, the people who minimize it as a cold, because especially if you're a working person, even if you got it and you're 2 shots, you're out of the hospital, you're still out of commission. If you got to go somewhere for a week. So it's just right now that's going a lot in Ontario too. Where
they pushed that
in lockdown. So.
They pushed the whole quarantine idea for this is stupid to begin. That's their whole thing. They just want it. You go when you have a cold, when you wake up and have a headache or a cough or the sniffles, you go to work, right? In the pre-pandemic time. So why the hell aren't you still doing the same thing? The sick days, you shouldn't be taking the day off unless you're on your deathbed. That's what they want to go back to. They're angry at the quarantine. So when they say, what you just brought up, they want that week where people have to stay home. They want to do away with that as well.
Yeah, and I guess just briefly on that too, is that the 5-day thing, it seemed crazy to me too. I just quarantined for the 10 days, and literally, I guess we have to thank you guys for the 5-day, because after Biden announced it, we still had the 10-day quarantine thing, and then I think on my 6th day, then Ontario adopted the 5-day quarantine or isolation guidelines, literally halfway through. And I was just what am I, I had no symptoms at that point, maybe some slight sniffles, but I still did the 10 days because I just thought, what am I going to do? Go to a New Year's Eve party or something like that? It's just, it was so weird. And I don't know, it's crazy. But the other thing I wanted to talk to you guys about was about my number one Canadian hero, number one bucko, Jordan Peterson.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, resigned. And I just wanted to give you guys just some I guess Ontario insider information. But that dude, he's such a clown. It's ridiculous. Everyone here knows that. But I know people who took his class, and of course, he has a certain type of charisma where if you don't really listen into him, you're not really going to see the contradictions. And then also too, right, maybe you're just in a class just to get the credit or whatever, right? So maybe you're not engrossed enough. But I know past 4 years he didn't he taught very little, if at all. But before he blew up, like I know people who took his courses, and anytime like you would pressure him on any of the kind of weirder ideas he brought up, like it would just like fall apart. Like this dude just has like barely any substance. I think some people hold his like whatever like
self-help
Jungian. Yeah, and like people who really held that in regard. But I guess to give you guys even more context is that, so one of the things besides the bill that made him famous is, him lying about that hate speech trans bill that we all know is BS now, and that was a wrong interpretation. I think he generally did believe that people would be locked up for saying the wrong pronouns, but it was just completely wrong, and he never corrected himself. But during that time, he would, again, this shows what a media grifter he was, but when he had more goodwill, he was speaking at a lot of Canadian universities, right? So obviously when you get into a controversy, that shows how honest and good faith you are, you're starting to book speaking arrangements. And the big and I guess it shows how it intersects with like kind of the left American ecosystem, because he went to McMaster University, where some kids protested him. And then I think that's where American media picked it up, right? The Ben Shapiro's and everything, they pointed it out. He went to my university, there weren't protests, but that's still when he had some goodwill. I went to a Western university up in London, Ontario. And at that time, I think even people like me were more receptive, kind of like, okay, like listen to this dude, but you don't have to like him. But the thing is, at least among my friends and the people who knew him, like he lost all the credibility in the world with like most, I think, Canadian university students. As soon as you said that forced monogamy stuff, where to me, that was like very mask off. So the fact he's resigning now, his tenure, is just like such a joke, because like, man, no one's taken you seriously for years. Even the people who, so I guess that was just my point, where it's like, I think this is just a strictly a press move. And so he has to not do any university work and just fully 100% lean on into that full reactionary right, because we haven't been taking them seriously for years.
He's resigning from his tenured position, but he's now professor emeritus, which means he's basically taken an early retirement and negotiated that position with the university. But in a way that, he's sort of self-canceled like Barry Weiss, so now he has something to talk about next time he goes on Joe Rogan's show.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure he's going to become a full-time professor at the University of Texas, Austin, that they're still trying to get off the ground, right?
Oh, yeah, right.
I haven't heard much about that since literally like a week after they announced it. A bunch of names started dropping out already. So I don't know what's going on with that now.
Well, they're still not accredited, so nothing really. But I mean, I'm sure like eventually it'll all fall apart and they'll blame the left, which is really, really sad, because, I don't think anyone wants it to work more than us. Like I would love the, kind of content that would come out of that farm.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks for the call. We're going to hang up. Yep.
If I was making as much money cleaning your room as Jordan Peterson I would also quit the job that has standards.
I forgot he was still a professor after the whole like addicted to meat thing and then like medically induced coma. It kind of like slipped my mind that he was also somehow a psychologist, I guess.
Yeah.
Physician, heal thyself, I think is. I mean, I don't want to like make light of anyone's suffering. It just seems like, after a while, the sort of like the pre downward slide credentials just become more and more doubtful.
Well, they do they do say that sometimes psychologists are the craziest, but that's I don't know how true that is.
I think it's true in Jordan Peterson's case.
It's true, yeah. All right, let's do another clip. So Tucker Carlson had Candace Owens on his program. She's really been on a tear of one claiming without any evidence that Bob Saget died of the coronavirus vaccine. She's just asking questions, people. She's just asking questions. But here she is on Tucker Carlson's program, using her I would put it crudely, I think race as a way to deflect from the fact that she is supporting racist policies, and allows for someone like Tucker Carlson to be like, see, audience, She's one of the good ones. She agrees with this. Here she is saying something outrageous about policies designed to help homeless people.
Candace Owens is the host of Candace, and we're delighted to have her join us tonight. Candace, thanks so much for coming on. Once you take a bigger look, and we could have gone on at greater length there, but at how this is funded by NGOs and by taxpayer dollars, the amount of money that's going to people to do drugs on the sidewalk, destroying our cities, which they didn't build and they don't own, you really realize this is a manufactured crisis.
Gosh, Tucker, there is so much that I want to say here. I know that I'm not going to have enough time. You're talking about NGOs, and I can't say to the American people enough. If you really want to look into what's going on, please understand, yes, it was manufactured. Yes, this was a plot. It does not allow people to look at you and issue pejoratives like you're a conspiracy theory. You can look this up yourself. A conspiracy theorist, you can look this up yourself. Take a look at the World Economic Forum. You know, the person that heads that up is a man named Klaus Schwab. He released a book in 2020 talking about how the COVID pandemic represented an opportunity for them to transform the world, for them to abolish private property. Look at everything they're doing, and you understand this is exactly what they're after, right? Eviction moratoriums, basically saying you have to allow people that are effectively homeless to live in your home. You're making entirely no money. How are people going to be able to pay back their mortgages? They're not going to be able to. They're going to default. People are going to be scooping up their properties that were once owned by people, hardworking American middle-class citizens, that were maintaining their lifestyles before the government forced shut this down. You look at these inner cities and you go, why do they want these problems? Why are they funding these problems? Why do they want drug addicts? Who on earth would ever fund a center to allow people to do drugs? Well, you're looking at a government that wants a system of dependence. To me, I look at the situation and I say, what we're seeing is a modernized system of slavery. This is slavery in 2022, and they are proliferating this under the guise of COVID-19.
I agree with you. I agree with every word of that. I wish I didn't, but I sincerely do.
So
I want to applaud Candace Owens for speaking at a reasonable pace, for at least me, because that was very rapid fire.
That was rapid. I mean, she must be at the Daily Wire offices taking some cues from her boss, from Ben Shapiro. She got to talk like this in order to, so people can catch their breath to see what I'm saying is absolutely, horrible and nonsensical. And notice the number of times she says owned there, because it's all about owning private property. They don't own the sidewalks that they sleep on. They don't own it, so they don't have a right.
They didn't build, or they did, and they don't own it. So what's the problem with, I guess just caging them all?
Yeah.
I thought that first chyron, or first little blurb they had under DIMS, making it easier to be homeless and harder to be middle class, was just top notch. That was a top notch Fox News scaremongering quote. I mean, I wouldn't limit that just to Democrats. I would say Republicans and Democrats are making it harder to be, not even just middle class, but just functionally make a living wage in this day and age. But I suppose it's correct, but not in the way they mean. At the same time, her starting off with that World Economic Forum, that gave me real strong Alex Jones vibes. I mean,
it's a straight up Alex Jones InfoWars conspiracy theory. The whole Great Reset thing, that is an entire full-blown deep internet conspiracy theory. Yeah, it's basically, they think that the World Economic Forum and various other globalists and elitists,
the IMF, World Bank, UN,
right. They're basically
interchangeable in this sense.
Right. They're basically trying to use the pandemic to basically change the world, turn it, like she said, abolish private property. Now there's some sort of papers that are out there. You know how these groups go. They get, economists and all sorts of different experts to put together these white papers and stuff, where it's just basically for academics. It's not really anything of this is going to be actually instituted. It's just basically how we can actually take what's happened and leave the pandemic, if we ever do, with lessons learned, for example, right, response, right? And the funny thing is, they use this, and it's obvious, because it's a full-blown attack on any idea that we can have a life that doesn't involve being, here I'm going to use a word Candace Owens like to use, owned by corporations or your employer. I know so many people who are working class and middle class who, thanks to unemployment benefits, thanks to stimulus checks, did really, did better than they did when they were working under the pandemic, the early months of the pandemic.
Yeah, but that's slavery, according to Candace Owens.
But that's important because when the American economic, the Institute of Economic Research, all these like Koch think tanks and libertarians, when they talk about the authoritarian response to COVID and using it as sort of like a disaster sort of like authoritarianism, they're talking about that. They're talking about how we paid people to stay home.
Yeah.
That's what they're really afraid about. And this conflation of the elites want to attack capitalism, that's of course, you can expect that from Candace Owens. That's also what Jimmy Dore and Glenn Greenwald are contributing to. Well, that there's somehow a split between capitalists and elites. No, they're the same thing.
Yes, and elites, but they just want elites to be like culture people who are at the top of culture or who associate with liberals, and they conflate people who make their audience feel like they're out of touch or feel talked down to with capitalist elites, which is like the exact project of, yes, someone like Greenwald, someone like Dore, and of course someone like Tucker, which is why they feel so at home on the show there. But I mean, I just want to focus a little bit more on Candace Owens and what she's trying to say about homeless people there. She's equating, and correct me if I'm getting this wrong, she's equating the programs designed to help homeless people with slavery.
Yeah,
and
that's...
by doing what? I mean, you're advocating for essentially locking up homeless people because they do not have homes in cages.
Probably using their prison labor.
Right. And what these new policies are doing is, at least, I mean, I couldn't discern what they were even necessarily talking about there because she was talking at a mile a minute and they were just blowing things completely out of a proportion, but they're designed for harm reduction, and any social spending on people that they see as undesirable or somebody who they do not want to have in their mind's eye or see on the street. Okay, that's slavery. Anything that's designed to help people, let's conflate that with slavery. And then, of course, she's the face to say it.
Well, I mean, that's like a very classic, I feel like, Black Republican talking point that you hear a lot, is that this idea that the Democratic Party wants to get Black people and other minorities hooked on the system in a way that is akin to living on a plantation in some sense, because they're being denied the freedom to go out into the workplace and like hustle like the rest of us. And instead, they're just being like addicted to like the government welfare state. And what I think is weird is like, when people, and then this also kind of loops in the part in the beginning about the World Economic Forum, like Matt was saying, like anyone who listens to enough like conspiracy theories will hear talking points like this all the time, because all like the UN and World Economic Forum and IMF and World Bank do is produce these like white papers that have incredibly like random names like Plan 19. And then so if you go back to it like 5-6 years later, it's like you see this was them planning like the Ebola outbreak in Africa at the time. And it's like, well, probably not that literally, but maybe, who knows. And the part that I find weird about a lot of like the right wing part of our country adopting this rhetoric, where it's normally just been like in the realm of the like lesser, like rather not as explicitly political conspiracy theory people, like who identify like these IMF like groups and things. It's like the actual problems with some of these like international like World Bank, IMF associations, like what they did like in Jamaica, etc. Like they're in favor of those things. Like they're in favor of like the neo-imperialism and like sort of like debtor states that we create in the global South using these kind of international systems. And so when they identify them as part of this like larger conspiracy, it becomes an even more like it's very vague, like what they don't agree with here, except for like this like really, again, minuscule slice of what they're interpreting as like, well, yeah, they're the the World Bank or the World Economic Forum or the WHO is actually trying to like abolish private property, when instead what they should be doing is like turning, I don't know, Nigeria into like a plantation, like a monocrop plantation state. And so it's like, it's a very like, again, it shows a lack of, I think, familiarity with all of these systems that are in like sort of pseudo-governmental systems that are in place in our country, so that the moment you identify them, people can look into them and go like, oh my God, like these people are up to some like nefarious stuff. It's like, well, yeah, but not like outside of our government's understanding or like permission. like the Gates Foundation and shit like that. It's like, yeah, they probably, but like we're like, largely we're in favor of 99% of those things.
Right. I just want to add to that because that's a great point. The Great Reset paper, as laid out by the World Economic Forum, like it is, like you said, one of these hundreds of all these organizations put out so many of these papers every year, and it's just like pure academics looking at it. But like it's not even like what they think it is. Like they claim that this is like the globalists want to turn the whole world into a big communist state, and it's like the opposite. Like, yeah, there are some like good points in the paper, like they want to end fossil fuel subsidies, and they make mention of like a wealth tax, but it's very actually the opposite. It's in defense of capitalism, the whole idea, because I think like the main crux of it, if I remember correctly, is basically we need to look at the society in a more global context, and that governments and non-governmental partners should each have like a vote in like the governmental, like a wider global government. And who are these non-governmental partners? Corporations, of course. So it's like exactly what they would actually want without realizing it, because they love their employers and their corporations.
I mean, I think that's like the ultimate appeal of this, is like the ultimate appeal of the far right, or even like what they would claim to be center right, like content creators moving in this conspiracy, like explicitly the conspiracy theory direction, is that like the ultimate purpose of a lot of these conspiracy theories is as a stand-in for like identifying that capitalism is failing and providing some sort of other esoteric reason for why the world is the way it is. Now that more and more people are identifying how like, not even just unequal society is, but just how incapable society is of dealing with, a pandemic. There has to be some reason why things are going bad. And so, a lot of these groups that they're identifying have intrinsically capitalistic gains and interests and goals. And so a lot more people are leaning away from identifying those goals and leaning more into identifying the sort of, Alex Jones, Bilderberg group-esque kind of esoteric portions of it as a stand-in for going like, oh no, the people on a lot of these boards are just the same people who are on a lot of the other boards you are, familiar with or not familiar with in terms of like corruption in our government. It's not so much a secret group as it is like a plain conspiracy in the form of capitalism.
I mean, that's the thing, is like, this is a right-wing populism, right? Who it's really delivering for is ultimately a Candace Owens saying, why won't somebody think of the rentiers, right? Like who's really being oppressed here is the people who can't evict somebody during a pandemic so they can continue to paying the mortgage. I guess one thing I would say is, in addition to the eviction moratorium, which I would reinstitute, and Joe Biden has not, and there's like no real push for that except for like certain parts of like the squad, that they should also stop mortgage payments. Like banks should be like, oh, you're screwed, bank. Sorry, we've done enough for you. You're not going to get those mortgage payments. But instead, it's just, let's see how we can deliver for people who want to kick people onto the street, and so they can continue, being a rentier.
Well, I mean.
Oh, well, no, I just said let's read some IMs, so just because we got some. I want to take some more calls, and then we can get some more clips in. Unless you want to quickly wrap that up, Brandon.
Oh no, I'm all right.
All right, cool. Gravy writes in, the first 500 attendees of the I Have a Dream speech received a commemorative signed MLK bobblehead.
Funko Pops now. That's the crazy thing.
Prairie Fire Kowalski, the Millennial Majority Report with host Emma Vigeland and guests is always a good time. The five of you would make quite the starting five for an online political basketball tournament if we needed to put that together. I don't know what that would entail, but sure. Anywho, great interview. This is Kowalski. The only class I took in college that dealt with feminism in any meaningful way was a U.S. history course from a Civil War to present. It was far more informative and impactful than I thought it was going to be. And the instructor made a lot of really good points when it comes to the race dynamics that played into it, as well as how some aspects of the patriarchy I didn't realize were there. I never once considered that women losing their last names in traditional marriages would have such damaging repercussions down the line with familial ties, creating isolation and property disputes. Upon reflection, that course may have done a ton to save me from the anti-feminist stuff from that era. Feminism is the liberation of all humanity was my takeaway. Leftist poggers. Yes, Kowalski.
And that's why Republicans want to ban education.
I didn't take a lot of, my college was whatever, not the best. But I didn't take a lot of courses that I think were like super progressive, except I did take Women and Gender Studies 101, and I read Bell Hooks for the first time. And that I think was really instrumental in changing my perspective on things.
And the first question Emma asked her professor when she entered that class on the first day was, what do you think about identity politics?
Oh, so you got the end of that. You got the end of the show there. Live Free and Die said Jordan Peterson will not be going broke, and while he doesn't have any credibility with me, one can always sustain yourself by pretending that white male power is under attack. He's going all anti-vax, accusing the government of prolonging the pandemic to prolong authoritarian rule, pretending that lockdowns and masks are training devices for the government to make a malleable population, while Canada literally has a record number of hospitalizations due to COVID presently in full-blown grift mode. Did you hang up on yourself, Bender?
I lost connection. It said it was a issue with Twilio, which I'm assuming our thing uses, which is like a company that provides phone services online.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I'm back on now, though. Back on.
Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, I know people close to me who had no idea what Jordan Peterson's politics were and thought like the self-help stuff was kind of inspirational. And
that is a model that the left needs to take seriously, because like he found people that were searching, right? More than like searching for some sort of answer or meaning. And he found them with a complete shit sandwich. But like he wasn't just on like conservative radio, right? Like he was in different places, and I think like that is something the left needs to get better at.
Yeah,
I agree with you, but it's still at the same time, it will never cease to shock me that there are a significant portion of people out there who heard this guy say, clean your room, and they went, oh my God, my life is like, come on, like, are you serious? Like, I mean, I guess people really do. I guess people really do need the very simple basics of, I mean.
Well, people feel atomized and like they want to have some agency over their life in the world that does not make sense and feels out of their control due to capitalism and also just like a ton of other forces. So that's an easy way to do that. That's why self-help books, people like them.
I mean, that Maria Kondo book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, went off too. Like it's basic, but that's what people.
It gives people a sense of control.
And she had a TV show. I think that's what helped her out. The TV show was entertaining. They liked seeing people living in complete, hoarder situations, and her walking in and being all cute and saying like, "Oh, I hate mess," and that's what made her big. Like Jordan Peterson didn't have anything like that.
I mean, I think generally speaking, people are feel very disempowered, like Emma's saying, and we've kind of, along with the atomization of people, we have psychologized a lot of problems. We've moved from like the level of sociology, level of like anthropology when trying to explain like why people feel a certain way. And now everything has become very like, you personally have the power to change what's about you due to like, a few like internal mechanisms, whether they be mindfulness or whether they be like just cleaning up your room. And some of that is obviously very valuable because, you have to have coping mechanisms, but you shouldn't forget that like a lot of the things that are making people feel bad are real and cannot be like solved by like cleaning your room. But there's no problem, I think, integrating a level of the personal in your pursuit of structural change. It's just most people I think are like content with like pretending like every problem they have, because that's the way they've been socialized, is an internal one, either like a moral or intellectual weakness that can be overcome that way, or maybe some kind of debilitating thing that can't be overcome, like they were born bad because of their race or gender or sexual orientation, in the eyes of like our society. But we have to move beyond that a little bit. But I guess you should also clean your room. I don't know. Like I do my dishes.
Nightmare Blunt Rotation writes in, great interview today. The white supremacist origins of bioessentialism definitely should be discussed more. I agree. True North Politics, has Left Reckoning had Emma on the show yet? I love Matt and Emma's deeper dive into issues.
No, but that should
I'd be down. Yeah. All right, one more and then let's take a call. Matt, if you can.
Sure.
Hitchens Ghost writes, and hey, I'm our crew, love the show, became a member last year. I've been working on some magic tricks using jewelry and crafting supplies lately, but I've had trouble grasping some concepts. I just couldn't see the gold, silver, or turquoise tricks working, but I've tried using Native American jewelry sourced from Vermont, and I can now see beady tricks working just fine. See beady tricks?
Something sounds a little bit high, but maybe I'm
Keep up the great and stay on your toes.
I don't know if that was like a joke or not, but speaking of magic, I've been rewatching some of those old Fox TV specials called like Behind the Mask or Magic Revealed, with like the math magician who shows you how all the tricks work from like the early 2000s, and that's really been bringing me back. So maybe, you know, Texter or IMer, like check out some of those. It's on like the Roku channel. Or
They were just trying to get me to say the real pronunciation, I think, of Sebede, the sponsor of our show, the non-psychoactive hemp. It gets us, you know, in trouble. The YouTube algorithm doesn't like it for some reason. So just let's just move on. Let's take a call.
They were trying to prank you, Emma.
Yep, I know.
267. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Dan from Doylestown.
Hey, Dan from Doylestown, you said? What would you like to talk about?
Yeah, what's up, guys? So I think the failures of the Democrats, as evidenced by yesterday, I feel like it should animate progressive candidates. Kind of akin to the run of Bernie in 15 and 16. It's way easier to see who's failing, who's on your team, and how ineffective they are. I feel like, you know, Fetterman's going to benefit a lot from this.
Oh, from your mouth to God's ears. Are you in Doylestown?
You only need two. Yeah, Pennsylvania, and you only need 2 pickups, right? So, I don't know. I just feel like this should be like a great time for progressive candidates all over the country to point at Democrats and say they're bad. You know, we need more of us in there.
Yeah, dude,
that are ruthless.
They only need 1 pickup, right? But they also can't lose any seats. So it's not really as simple as just.
Well, they're going to lose the House. I mean, the thing about this, though, is like negative.
Yeah.
Having Democrats in power and then telling the voter base, get animated to have more Democrats in power because we've done nothing. That is not effective. It's effective for us leftists to get pissed off, but people don't drive to the polls based on like they do drive based on negative emotion. Sorry?
I don't know. I feel like this is just an opportunity for progressives to win primaries, because they're going to, to your point, they're going to say like, listen, these people are just going to, you know, sit on their hands here. You know, we need people who are actually going to get in there and make change.
Dude,
I don't know. I just think this could be an animating force for the left.
I hope you're right, man. I really do. I think like the left and someone like you who's paying a ton of attention, that may be the case, but we're still a fraction. Yeah. And I think someone like Fetterman has a better position, is in better position than a lot of the other candidates across the country right now. So, you know, do all you can for Fetterman for sure.
Yeah, rock and roll. All right, see you guys.
Appreciate it.
Also, I think the problem with comparing anyone to Bernie is simply people forget that Bernie Sanders is a freaking senator. Like, you know, if he wasn't a senator who had been where he was for so long and you know, in Congress for so long, I mean, I hate to say it, his campaign likely would not have taken off, because the whole idea was, whoa, someone like this saying this stuff, believing this stuff, but actually already in Congress, so he has a chance of winning. Like there's no one, there's no bench on the left. And when we talk about, obviously, further down the line, even past midterms, like that's what I'm worried about. There is like Bernie was the one who had all the different attributes necessary. And unfortunately, while there's great people who are even better on politics than Bernie, they don't quite have the time and the resume that I don't care about that. Obviously, a lot of people do when they do go to the voting booth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, we have to speak to the truth that the system, in terms of like the legitimizing factors for why people are taught to vote for somebody, have been rigged to account for, basically requiring people who want to be in a position of power to subject themselves to years and years of this, the indoctrination system that is like working through Democratic Party politics and like, having the right internships, having the right, appointment clerkships at different judges. So, it kind of self-selects by the time you get to a position to actually run, you basically have to be indoctrinated to a certain point to get that position. So how do we convince people to re-examine what their expectations and what counts as like political expertise? Because right now we just have a political system that's just full of like C-tier lawyers. That's it. Like it's like a C-tier lawyer after C-tier lawyer. And sometimes you get an A-tier lawyer like Elizabeth Warren, who's like kind of smart. But largely, we have a lot of just like lawyers who went to the same handful of schools, were in the same handful of clubs, and that's just part of like the fake meritocracy that people are taught to like and believe in and vote for.
Right. All right. Let's get to this other clip here. Hold on. Oh man, this is funny. So, have you guys been seeing those like anti-vax demonstrations throughout New York City? The
ones where they go to like Olive Garden.
They're always in Olive Garden, yeah.
Burger King, right? That kind of stuff. So
Cheesecake Factory.
Yeah.
I feel like these are all in Queens and like Staten Island though, because those are the big cop boroughs.
They're in New York City.
Those are New York City. That is
New York City too, not just Queens and Staten Island.
Right. Yeah.
No, you were right the first
time. To Manhattan, though, right? Yeah.
Manhattan is what I meant to say. Yeah. No, they've been in Manhattan. And
what an elitist over
in Brooklyn.
Elitist, Emma. No, that's not.
That's what I meant. That's what I meant. So the guy that's been leading the charge is a guy named Mitchell Bosch. And so he's been arrested in the Manhattan, I believe, Burger King. And he is continuing, though, in his civil disobedience. He went to the Museum of Natural History, which is like pretty dope place to go. Love that place. But he was denied entry because he's unvaccinated. You'll never guess what he does next.
Yeah, so I just want to state that, I literally had to urinate in a bottle inside the Museum of Natural History. I talked to the security out of respect. Right? And the keys to New York City clearly state that even though I'm unvaccinated, I can go with a face cloth in front of my face and to go ahead and go use the bathroom. That's what keys to New York City says. But inside, I went ahead as a gentleman, went over to the corner, and I literally had to urinate. And I told the gentleman, if it goes over, that's not on me, because I'm not going to stop. No. Men know what I'm talking about. I went to the corner, I went away from everybody, because he said in the area that we're in, there is no bathroom. And I'm not going outside, no. This is where we're at, America, right? This is where we're at. It's a sad day. And I have other freedom fighters who need to use the bathroom, females, right? Maria needs to use the bathroom.
Okay, well, Maria needs to use the bathroom. She can't pee in a bottle like him in the corner of the Museum of Natural History. He should drink it if he wants to cure COVID. I've heard that's
I think that he raises a great point about the lack of public infrastructure and public available places to pee in New York City. And we don't talk about this enough. And it's, again, very part of our anti-homeless or anti-housed individuals, sentiment in the city, to making everything uncomfortable, for making everything incredibly uncomfortable for them has become so much more important than providing even the most basic level of sanitation infrastructure. It's ridiculous that he has to go inside the museum to pee at all, as opposed to there should just be public bathrums that account for.
I think he was there as a part of his obedience. But you're right. I mean, that the Starbucks was given so much great press when they said you don't need to buy anything to use our bathrooms, even though half of them, by the way, are still no homeless people here, because we have ceded all of our public spaces to private industry and we don't have public bathrooms. But on another point, I just want to make sure, this guy Mitchell, he's got to hydrate a little bit more. That is not that is some dark urine, dude. Drink some water, please. That's not healthy. I'm worried about him in many ways.
He clearly wasn't just out and about the town looking to like, go to the looking to like, have a good time and looking for a bathroom. He like came there specifically to pee, and that's why he like, has not been hydrating all day. It shows, but I think this goes to show like this is where we are as a country. We have a portion of the population who is, not just portion, but like is now expecting themselves to like make these kinds of like spectacles of like their non-compliance with a public health measure in order to prove something to somebody about freedom that doesn't even exist in this country. Like it's all very convoluted, but it's an example of how we've been living for a long time. And again, much like the lack of publicly available bathrooms, the COVID pandemic is just like showing all of these cracks in our system that just makes so many basic things impossible here. Just due to this like this deep anti-social sentiment.
Yeah,
Emma, you haven't heard that the darker the pee, the stronger COVID protection it provides you when you drink it?
Yeah, honestly, that pee should be sold on the black market, and for all these conservatives who want to drink to cure their COVID, or if you've been vaccinated, it can maybe even reverse the effects of the vaccine. So he's got a gold mine.
We better be clear for YouTube policy purposes. We are joking. Don't drink pee. It's not COVID fighting medication, please.
You're
joking. It's also really bad for your kidneys and like your renal tract. So don't drink it.
It is funny though that they get treated basically like undesirable, like basically America treats homeless people, right? And frankly, probably a little bit better. And then they think they're Anne Frank, like standing up against like a Nazi, encroachment. It's unbelievable. This is where we are.
Also, a lot of stuff that they complain about, again, like these are just the results of policies that they or like their analogs in government have been promoting for like decades, like just the absolute demolishing of public spaces in a way that like makes it so, yeah, if you do want to go into like use a bathroom somewhere, even if that place is, Starbucks or the museum, you kind of have to have like a reason to be there, I suppose, and also use the vaccine. Like, hate to say it, but if we had more public bathrooms, this wouldn't be a problem. I mean, obviously he's just there to make a spectacle, but if you take him at his word that he has to go to the bathroom, there should be more bathrooms. I agree.
There absolutely should be. I mean, New York, I've learned, like, if I'm going someplace, you need to go to the bathroom before you do any kind of traveling, because if you need to find a bathroom, it's difficult unless you're going to spend money for, like, a coffee or something.
Yeah, get a water or whatever.
Or if you're around, like, the park, and because there's a bunch of porta potties in, like, Central and, Prospect Park. They're just various public... That's it.
Right.
Although I believe, like, I was at the park in Battery Park City, and I think that they closed it down due to COVID or something.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. A lot of the bathrooms that, exist in these like Starbucks and private enterprises, not necessarily Museum of Natural History, are being closed, or restricted to employees only because of COVID-19. So there's even less available bathrooms than there were, prior. And honestly, since Starbucks closes now and it's not 24 hours, if you're at, out in New York City at night and have to go to the bathroom, you're just like shit out of luck.
Oh,
because, there's nowhere to go.
And of course, this is the first time this guy's ever experienced any of that, obviously, because he comes from a position of privilege in the very sense of like never having to worry about like having to have a toilet, because he's able to afford paying for establishments that require you to actually be in there and eat or, do whatever, make a purchase so you can use their bathrooms.
Also, again, the Museum of Natural History, for people who don't know, who don't live in New York, like is right across the street from from Central Park. It's right there. You could literally just walk to Central Park and go to one of the public porta potties or various other bathrooms that the only public bathrooms that really exist in New York City. But they chose to instead, for reasons, I guess, like due to modesty, to pee inside surrounded by museum goers, when I would even argue just peeing in Central Park in the woods would have been way more private than going inside.
Yes, I'm glad he outed himself as exposing himself to all the children that are likely seeing the dinosaurs at the Museum of Natural History.
Well, he obviously did what he did so he could make this video. That was the whole point of it. Yeah.
District Jabroni, what is it with conservatives and P this month? At this rate, the midterms are going to be a yellow wave for Republicans. Jesus Christ. Chantel writes in, Brandon, Emma, my sister works in a hospital, and she says that they have implemented a policy that prioritizes vaccinated people over unvaccinated for surgeries. But she said 60 to 70% of patients coming in for surgeries without vaccination are Black or Latino. Aren't such policies dangerous to further create a divide? Yes, I don't agree with that policy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, this talks to the context in which our healthcare system existed in right up into and including COVID. We just don't have enough hospitals. We don't have enough healthcare professionals. We don't have enough any of that stuff. And a lot of the stuff that we're talking about now kind of takes for granted that it had to be that way because it just is. When in reality, we should be looking for, like, how come there just aren't enough hospitals for anybody?
Right. Is this me? Writes in, there's a self-help model that's like Wolf of Wall Street, where you start with blue chip advice, clean your room, be mindful, take care of yourself. And once they've been suckered, they unload the ideological dog shit. I think that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
I also think, as somebody who watches a lot of pickup artist shows, that, like, the idea that you can hack your own personal psychology has become a big part of, like, the modern pop psychology wave, that, like, life hacks and, like, how to, like, reprogram your brain so you can, like, be a playboy in the bar and a playboy in the, like, boardroom. Like, stuff like that has become very popular because, again, it presumes to give you a way to avoid falling into the traps and hazards of that are designed into our system by, like, internal strength.
Yeah,
I mean, I gotta get into this market here, the self-help world. Geez, apparently money's just flying around for the most basic advice. What the hell am I doing?
I'm telling you, if we had gotten on my self-help book, How to Be a Bad Bitch in the Boardroom and a Bad Bitch in the Bedroom, with foreword by RBG, we would all have retired from YouTube by now. But, now she's dead. You gotta do, like, a seance and call a ghost to get. And I don't know if that's going to pass, like, the legal, the editor guidelines for that kind of thing.
All right, let's take a call.
All right, let's go to the phones. 646. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, is this me?
This is you. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, I'm Aaron. I'm calling from St. Louis.
Hey, Aaron from St. Louis. What would you like to talk about today?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you, Matt. I didn't think you were going to read my DM, but I really appreciate it getting me on. I think that I've been seeing a lot on, like, Twitter and whatever about how a lot of people are blaming what happened last night in Mansion Cinema. I'm not here to, rectify their image. They're terrible people. We should do everything we can to get them out of office, obviously. But I
you DM'd me from the Twitter handle Mansion Cinema Lover 283. That was you, right?
No, that's not me. That's not me.
Go ahead. I'm making a joke.
Yeah. No, they're villains, and I have no problem seeing that. But I do think we should understand that what happened last night with the filibuster and the voting rights, that's a problem with Schumer. I spent way too much time, like, going through, like, Senate rules and all that type of stuff and looking up, like, the history of the filibuster. And I won't bore everyone with all the rules, but what it seems to be is, like, this whole discussion of the talking filibuster and all that stuff. At the end of the day, it's just like it's just sort of like Senate practice, but it's not a rule, right? When the Senate brings up something for a vote, right, and for unanimous consent, and then someone puts a hold, someone objects, it's just Senate procedure, but it's not like a rule to say, okay, we're going to move on to something else and we'll try to do cloture. Schumer could have, after Republicans refuse to do cloture, say, okay, well, you guys have to stand on the floor for the next 3 weeks, keep proposing amendments, motions, and speeches until you're out of everything, and keep the Senate to a halt. And, what the motion that they tried to pass last night was purely something to say, the rest of this debate, no more amendments, motions, or points of order. You just have to speak, which was, I guess, a way to limit its debate to, like, maybe a couple days. And I think the reason why he didn't want to, like, play hardball and say, look, you guys have to keep proposing amendments and speeches on the floor is because the Democrats quite like the filibuster. Mm-hmm. I mean, they don't want to have a situation where, like, the new precedent is you're going to have to sleep in cots in the cloakroom while you're giving speeches at 5 a.m. for 10 hours, when all your committee hearings, are shut down and Rand Paul can't get his, like, sound clip of talking with Fauci, right? Like, he could have done that, but that would have fundamentally changed the way the Senate works to actually be somewhat functional. And so I think that, we can talk all we want about Manchin cinema, but I think we need to understand that Schumer, would much prefer to have a nomination be voted on today than, have the Senate essentially just be shut down for 3 weeks to make sure this bill gets passed. And so I think that that's something we need to recognize. And I think also, Matt, I heard earlier you talking about like the the progressive bench. I think there are a lot of really interesting Senate candidates that I really think could be really good. John Fetterman, obviously. I think another one from my state's Lucas Kuntz. He hasn't gotten too much play amongst progressive circles, but I think he's like almost like the perfect candidate messaging wise. He's a former Marine who's come out very anti-Afghan war, talked about how his experience as a Marine was like showing how the war was complete sham. And I think he does a really good job of like pushing a progressive message. But anyway, I wanted to hear what your thoughts are on that.
How do you spell his last name?
I'm not sure.
Oh, I found it. It's Lucas with a C and then Kuntz, Kunce. Lucas Kuntz.
If it were up to me, they wouldn't even get the cots when they were just being forced to sleep in the break room. That's just, call me a hard ass, but they would be on the floor.
Oh yeah, they could go in the cot.
I know.
If they need some privacy.
Yeah, but like I was like reading up about like the civil rights like filibusters, and like Lyndon Johnson like would literally like walk across the street and wake up senators like sleeping in office building cots to come fill up quorum calls. And like Dianne Feinstein doesn't want to sleep on a cot. Like it's not happening. And I think it's just like it's gutless. And I think we need to push for better democratic leadership that actually wants to play hardball.
Yeah, it's weird. A lot of what we seem to be held hostage by in this country are like these like informal like office like rules that like are masquerading as laws, that they want you to believe that like the Senate is like a real 9-to-5 job just like yours. And isn't it important to have like good relationships with your coworkers? I'm like, that's fucking ridiculous. That's the most ridiculous thing. They used to beat each other in like the 1800s with like canes. Not that they should be still doing that, but like this idea that like we should all be held hostage to like the appropriateness of the office space that is the United States Senate is, a functionally just meant to appeal to those people who work within that little sliver of like centrist life that is like city offices where they hate their boss and hate their colleagues because they're all like stealing jobs or whatever from each other. It's very, I think juvenile.
And also a commitment to rules allows there to be all of these institutional safeguards from doing anything that they don't feel like doing. You have a boogeyman in the form of a rule, and then it also creates this false appearance that you're competent and also pragmatic and like a steward of the American institution.
Yeah, I mean, the Democratic Party has made themselves into like the middle managers of this government, and they just exist to explain why the rules exist to prevent you from having anything nice.
Go on, Aaron. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no, sorry. I think you're right about the rules, but it's also not always just rules. It's also just like precedents, and things are not written down anywhere, and it's just like, well, this is how the Senate works. And like Joe Manchin actually sort of pulled the cover up, like pulled back the curtain when during the debate. I watched way too much of the Senate yesterday, but asked like, could we just do a talking filibuster without rules change? And they didn't give a straight answer, because the answer is we could. But they would make us actually have to do our jobs.
Yeah.
And it's just really frustrating. And I think the other thing is like when you look at like the getting rid of the filibuster for the debt ceiling, it was done in such a like haphazard way and like complex way where like most people are looking at like, I have a 9-to-5 job. I can't like spend hours like trying to figure out what the fuck they're doing. And I think that's also a way of doing it. It's like make it seem so much more complicated than it actually is to alienate people. And it just sucks. So
I agree. Well, appreciate the call. You are the final caller of the day. Thanks so much, Aaron. Have a good one.
All right, thank you guys. Take care.
And I'm sorry you have to watch I'm sorry that you are choosing to watch all that Senate footage, but it's helpful.
Well, the Jets aren't in the playoffs, so I have nothing else to do.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Go Jets.
No. Well, I mean,
Go
I don't
Jets.
really care. Like the little brother syndrome. All right. Appreciate it. Later. Bye. All right. Let's read some like 10 more IMs, and then we are going to wrap this shit up. hung up for you, Matt.
Oh, why? Thank you. Okay, cool.
You're welcome. I didn't want people hanging on anymore if they didn't hear. University of Austin writes in, to be fair, if Schumer tried to be like LBJ and make the senators sleep on cots, it would probably kill over half of our 70-plus senators.
Hey, that's leverage.
Exactly. Illuminati Kid says, you can't make Feinstein lay on a cot. She thinks she's being taken to the morgue and freaks out. Have you read my email? Writes in, proper access to bathrooms is also a disability issue. Access to accessible public bathrooms should be a human right. Well, yeah. I mean, another thing about New York City is, like, I saw Eric Adams saying we have the greatest transportation system in the world the other day. And when a reporter said, well, what do you say to people who don't agree? And he was like, I feel sorry for you, basically.
We are a very disability unfriendly city, especially when it comes to like public transportation. Like the very few train stations are accessible for people with disabilities. That's just like one of the many ways.
No, that's what I mean. I was getting at that point too. Yeah, Brandon, and the idea that there should be a bathroom in every subway station. But
absolutely.
I mean, what, Penn Station has one? The big transit hubs for like trains.
Yeah,
that's about it. And oftentimes they close them down.
Also, I've been to London. I would put London's
oh my God
system above New York.
Yes.
Like, I mean, it's the downside is it's not open all night, but I mean, New York's hardly is, like, if you actually try to use it really late at night. And the trains are just way nicer.
And they're pretty.
And way timelier.
Maddie Moron writes in, Manu Raju reporting Manchin said he wants COVID inflation and the national debt dealt with first before coming back to Build Back Better, laughing my ass off. What a fucking psychopath. Manchin.
Oh, yeah,
just goes to show how how completely failed Dem leadership legislative strategy has been, at least according to its publicly professed goals. 100%. Beautifully written ethos writes in, is that just like a reference to things a bunch of things I said in the interview? They have a fucking majority in the Senate now. 2 pickups won't change anything. I mean, it'll change maybe some things, but yeah, it's like the idea that all the energy that went into Georgia is just going completely to waste is a tragedy. 5 more. Marvin Jarvis. Kondo's book was a massive bestseller before she had a show. Working in a bookstore, you notice that that self-help sells like hotcakes. 100%. CIA handler. The crazy QAnon community has been spreading around a picture of the 2004 Forum of Young Global Leaders put together by Klaus Schwab, which included some very familiar faces like Dan Crenshaw, Tulsi Gabbard, Pete Buttigieg, and Maria Bartiromo alongside Rothschild and Soros. They are claiming they are secret globalists that are infected and infiltrating our politics. I'm surprised that they included Tulsi in that. I feel like she's kind of in there.
I mean, she's totally a globalist.
Yeah. A square. Oh, well, I already read that one. Just a few more. Mercedes, my sister's an elective elementary school teacher in San Antonio. Last Monday, 11 teachers were out and 100 students too. By Friday, all 5th grade teachers were out and more than 120 students. She was out Friday till Tuesday because she had symptoms waiting for her test results. Every teacher at her school is at the point that they believe they will all get COVID because of how could they avoid it now? It's incredibly frustrating. Also, the COVID testing results take 4 to 5 days to receive. And are taking multiple tests between waiting for their results. I know. It's insane.
They sound really fear-mongered down there.
Below me, the Great Reset version I heard from my coworker was erasing all sovereign debt. And
that would be a great thing to
That's
do.
a great idea. A global jubilee. Perfect idea.
Just one statement on that, sort of like, if there wasn't in any of these white papers the idea coming up that, hey, actually our fealty to private property above absolutely anything is an obstacle in things like responding to coronavirus or global warming, then it'd be a severe problem. And the problem to me sounds like that stuff isn't isn't actually put into action. And I'd love to argue on the merits of some of these policies if they were actually like on the table to be implemented, because like the IP protection, just to name one thing, right? That's private property getting in the way of vaccinating people across the world.
And
what if we bought an NFT of the vaccine IP? Can we like make it then?
Well, you own it, right? You own the patent, I guess. That's automatically.
I just thought of a good idea. We should make the Vax cards be on NFTs.
Whoa.
And then all those folks are going to be like want theirs.
Honestly, I would not be surprised if that wasn't already floated, because they love bringing up how, the blockchain is a ledger where everything that's put on the blockchain is factual and true and stored forever. And it's, it is what it is. It's a record of what's gone on.
I don't mind being a boomer as long as I have to buy an ape.
Rob from Dedham, the only thing that would make MLK Day more American would be to make it a drinking holiday too, as we seem to do with most other holidays. And Dank Uger writes in, someone from MLK's family should scam Ravel with fake merch like Logan Paul got scammed with fake Pokemon cards. And the final I am of the day, Michael Tracy's delightful girlfriend. MLK wants you to keep your whites whiter with Tide. Got it. All right, guys. Great show. Thanks so much, everybody. We will see you tomorrow.
Take care.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. Finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice is made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years while I shifted in